He grabbed the wedding cake knife off the table, not to cut anything, just to have something to hold so his hands would stop shaking. 5 years of standing at the edge of other people's happiness. 5 years of building love stories for strangers while his own was buried 6 feet under. And tonight was supposed to be just another job. Then she walked across the room and said 4 words that cracked something open inside him. He thought was sealed shut forever. Just one dance. What happened next didn't just change his life, it forced him to make a choice no widowed father should ever have to face. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this hits home, subscribe. You won't want to miss where this goes. Daniel Whitmore had not touched the knife. He was still holding it, his right hand wrapped around the silver handle, the blade resting flat against his palm, when Marcus appeared beside him at the dessert table and grabbed his wrist. Put that down before someone thinks you're about to ruin my reception. Daniel set the knife down. He hadn't even realized he'd picked it up. Sorry. You okay? I'm fine. Marcus Ellison studied him the way a man studies his oldest friend, not looking at his face, looking past it. They had known each other since they were 19 years old. Marcus knew what fine sounded like when Daniel meant it, and this wasn't that. You've been standing over here for 40 minutes. I've been watching the room. You've been hiding. I work better from the edges. Marcus glanced toward the dance floor, then back at Daniel. You're not working tonight, man. You finished working 3 hours ago. The stage looks incredible, by the way. Sarah cried when she saw it. Good. That means I got the lighting right. That means you got everything right. Marcus put a hand on his shoulder. So stop standing next to the food like you're the hired help and come sit with us. You're a guest tonight. Daniel looked at the dance floor. Couples moved in slow circles under the amber lights. Lights Daniel had rigged himself, positioned at exactly the angle that made everyone look like they belonged in a film. He knew every fixture up in those rafters. He had touched every one of them. He did not belong under them. I'm good here. Marcus opened his mouth, closed it, and then did something he rarely did. He let it go. He squeezed Daniel's shoulder once and walked back toward his new bride, without another word. Because Marcus understood something that most people didn't. There were certain kinds of grief you didn't push. You just stayed nearby and waited. Daniel picked up a glass of champagne from a passing tray. He did not drink it. He was 35 years old, and he had been to 41 weddings. He knew that number because he kept a logbook, not for sentimental reasons, but practical ones. Every wedding he attended as a vendor, he documented. The venue layout, the lighting challenges, the things that went wrong, the things that went perfectly. It was a professional habit that had started years ago and never stopped. What had started as documentation had slowly become something else. A record of other people's beginnings. 40 fun ceremonies. 41 first dances. 41 moments where 2 people stood in the center of a room and made a promise in front of everyone they loved. Daniel had stood at the edge of every single one. He ran his own custom design studio out of a converted warehouse space on the east side of Columbus. Whitmore Craft and Design, and he had built it from nothing. After Emily died, when Lily was barely 4 years old and Daniel was 30 years old and the world had collapsed into a size he could barely breathe inside, work had been the one thing that kept him vertical. He would drop Lily at school, drive to the warehouse, and pour himself into wood and metal and light from 7 in the morning, until he had to pick her up at 3. He built furniture at first, tables, bookshelves, bed frames. Then a client asked if he could design a wedding arch. He said yes, because he needed the money. The arch won an award at a regional bridal show. A coordinator saw it, hired him for a full venue installation. That venue led to another. That coordinator recommended him to 2 others. Within 18 months, Daniel Whitmore was one of the most sought-after wedding installation designers in Central Ohio. And he had never once gone looking for the work. It had simply found him, the way things sometimes find the people who least want them. He was good at making places where love happened. He just couldn't make himself stand inside one. Lily had asked him a question that morning while he was packing the van. She was 9 now. She had Emily's dark eyes and Emily's habit of tilting her head to the left when she was thinking through something that genuinely puzzled her. This morning, Head tilted, she had stood in the doorway of the garage and watched him load the last of the decorative panels into the back of the van. "Dad, yeah, Bug, when you go to weddings, do you dance?" He stopped. He kept his back to her for just a second longer than he needed to, then turned around and gave her the smile he had gotten very good at, the one that reached his eyes just enough to be convincing. "I'm working, not dancing. But Marcus's wedding is tonight, and you said you're going as a guest." "I said I was going as a friend." "Same thing, not the same thing." She tilted her head further. "Do you ever want to dance again?" Daniel crouched down so he was at her level. He looked at her face, Emily's face, with 5 years of Lily layered over it, and he thought about saying something honest. He thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Maybe someday, Bug." Lily nodded slowly, like she was filing the answer away. Then she ran back inside to finish her cereal, and Daniel stood in the driveway for a moment longer before he got in the van. Maybe someday. He had been saying that for 5 years. The wedding had gone flawlessly. The ceremony was held at a renovated mill on the outskirts of the city, a place Daniel had transformed, over 3 days of installation work. He had built the altar from reclaimed oak, designed the overhead canopy of white birch branches and Edison bulbs, and positioned the floor, lighting so the whole space glowed amber and gold when the sun dropped behind the hills. When Sarah walked in and saw what he had built, she had grabbed his arm with both hands and said, "Daniel, it looks like something out of a dream." And he had nodded and said, "I'm glad," and meant it completely. Because that was the part of his work he genuinely loved, the moment someone saw it and felt something true. He loved building that feeling. He had learned to be satisfied standing outside it. By the time the reception began, and the guests moved to the adjoining hall, Daniel had dismantled his tools, spoken briefly to the venue coordinator, changed out of his work clothes in the van, and walked back inside as a guest. He found a spot near the large windows that overlooked the garden, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server, and began the familiar process of watching. The DJ was good. The band that opened the evening was better. Marcus, in a navy suit that his new wife had clearly picked out, looked like the happiest man on the planet, which, Daniel thought, he probably was. Sarah had her arms around his neck during the first dance, her face pressed into his shoulder, and Marcus had his eyes closed. And Daniel watched them from 40 feet away and felt something complicated move through him that he never had a name for. Not envy, not bitterness. Something quieter, something like I remember. He pressed his thumb against the inside of his left wrist, a small private gesture nobody ever noticed, and thought about Emily. About the first dance at their own wedding, 8 years ago. About how she had whispered in his ear, "We're doing this," like she couldn't quite believe it. Like happiness on that scale was something that still surprised her. He closed his hand into a fist. He picked up the champagne glass. He did not drink it. He had been standing there for 30 minutes when the prickling sensation started. It wasn't something he could explain precisely, more a feeling of being watched. Not the casual glancing awareness of being in a crowded room, but something more deliberate, specific. He scanned the room the way he always did, the practiced sweep of someone who had spent years assessing spaces, and he found it almost immediately. Across the room, near the edge of the bar, a woman was looking directly at him. She was not looking away when he caught her. That, in itself, was unusual. Most people, when they're caught staring, look down or sideways, or suddenly find something fascinating on the ceiling. This woman did none of those things. She simply held his gaze, calm, steady, unreadable the way someone looks at a painting they're trying to figure out. She was striking, not in the loud, immediate way of someone performing beauty, but in the quieter way of someone who was simply, completely themselves, dressed in a deep green that made her skin look like warm copper, her hair pulled back. Her posture so composed it almost looked architectural. She was holding a glass of wine she hadn't touched. Daniel realized a half-second later that he was holding a glass of champagne he hadn't touched. He looked away. He looked back. She was still watching him. Then she moved. She didn't drift toward him the way people drift at parties, with the gradual, tentative momentum of someone hoping to be intercepted before they arrive. She walked directly across the room with a kind of purpose that parted the crowd without effort. People stepping aside, without quite knowing why. And she stopped 3 feet in front of Daniel Whitmore and looked at him like she had already decided something before she got it there. You don't know me. I don't. I'm going to say something that might be forward. Okay, she tilted her head just slightly. You've been standing at the edge of this room for the better part of an hour. You're holding a glass you won't drink. You smile every time someone looks at you, and the moment they look away, your face does something completely different. Daniel said nothing. I couldn't stop noticing, she continued, because I'm doing the same thing. She extended her hand not the way people extend hands at business events, stiff and formal, but open. Reaching, just one dance, he looked at her hand. I don't dance. Something shifted at the corner of her mouth, not quite a smile. Something smaller than that. Neither do I. Then, why? Because I'm tired of standing at the edge, watching everyone else live their lives. She didn't flinch when she said it. She said it. The way people say things they have been thinking for a long time, without ever saying out loud. And I think you might be too. Daniel looked at her hand. He looked at the dance floor. He looked back at her. And for a reason he could not have explained to anyone, not to Marcus, not to Lily, not even to himself he took it. Her name was Victoria Sterling. He learned that 20 seconds into the first song, when she introduced herself the way people in a hurry introduce themselves, last name included, and he said his own name, and she nodded like she was signed it filing it somewhere. Daniel Whitmore. The one who built all of this? The coordinator mentioned me? Sarah mentioned you. She said, the man who built the altar is the same man, who comes to every wedding and stands alone next to the windows. She said that? She said she worries about you. Daniel felt something tighten in his chest that he pressed down before it reached his face. Sarah doesn't need to worry about me. I told her the same thing about myself, and she put me at this event anyway. The almost smile again. She has a type. She collects broken things and tries to fix them. I'm not broken. Victoria looked at him with an expression that was not unkind. I didn't say you were. I said she thinks you are. There's a difference. They danced in a small circle. Neither of them was particularly good at it. She stepped on his foot within the first 30 seconds and made a sound that was somewhere between a gasp and a laugh. And Daniel, genuinely surprised, laughed too. He couldn't remember the last time he had laughed at a wedding. Sorry, she said. I warned you. You did warn me. I'm better at most things than I am at this. What things? She considered. Running a company, reading people, knowing when to walk away from a bad investment. Are you trying to tell me this dance is a bad investment? I'm trying to tell you I'm better at knowing when to leave than I am at staying. He didn't know what to do with that, so he said nothing. They turned slowly. The music was a standard Etta James. At last and around them, couples swayed with the easy comfort of people who had danced together 100 times. Daniel and Victoria moved like two people learning the steps of something new, careful with each other in the way that strangers are careful before they understand each other's edges. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. You can ask. Why do you keep coming to weddings when it clearly costs you something to be here? Daniel looked over her shoulder, at the room, at the lights he had built, the flowers around the archway he had constructed. Marcus and Sarah at their table with their hands intertwined. Because Marcus is my best friend. That's why you came tonight. Why do you keep taking the work? He was quiet for a moment. Because I'm good at it. That's not the real reason. He looked at her. You just met me. I know. But I'm good at reading people. I told you. He could have deflected. He was practiced at deflection, 5 years of practice, of steering conversations toward safer ground, of answering the question slightly adjacent to the one that was actually being asked. But something about the way she was looking at him, steady, without pity, without the particular softness people got in their eyes when they were about to say, I'm so sorry for your loss, made the deflection feel pointless. Because, he said slowly, it's the only place I still feel close to something I used to believe in. Victoria was quiet. The song kept moving around them. Tell me, she said. Not a question, not an order. Something in between. And Daniel Whitmore, who had not told anyone outside his closest circle the true shape of his grief in 5 years, opened his mouth and told her about Emily. He didn't tell her everything. Not all at once. It came out in pieces. The way things come out when you're surprised into honesty, fragments rather than a narrative. Moments rather than a timeline. He told her about the accident. How it was a Tuesday in November, ordinary in every way until it wasn't. How he had been in the warehouse, working on a commission, when his phone rang. How he had seen it, was the hospital, not Emily's number, the hospital's, and had felt, in the second, before he answered, a cold weight dropped through his stomach that told him something had already changed before he heard a single word. He told her about Lily. About driving home from the hospital to the babysitter's house and picking up his 4-year-old daughter and holding her in the car for 45 minutes before he could make himself drive. Because the moment he drove home, the house would be real, and the empty side of the bed would be real, and the life that was going to start from this moment forward would be real. And he needed 45 more minutes before he let all of that become real. He told her about the recipe book. How Emily had kept a spiral-bound notebook in the kitchen, handwritten recipes, clipped magazine pages, notes in the margins in her cramped, impatient handwriting. How Lily had found it one afternoon, about 6 months after the accident, and brought it to Daniel and asked what it was. And Daniel had sat on the kitchen floor with his daughter and read recipes aloud until Lily fell asleep against his side. He didn't tell her that he still read it sometimes. That was still his. Victoria listened through all of it without making the sounds people usually made, the sympathetic murmurs, the "oh no," and "that's so hard," and the gentle interjections that were really just ways of making the listener feel like they were participating. She just listened. She let him talk. He stopped. She was quiet for a moment. The second song had started, without either of them registering it. "She sounds like she was remarkable," Victoria said. "She was. And you've been carrying all of that alone. I have Lily." "That's not what I meant." He looked at her. She was right, and he knew she was right. And the fact that she had walked through a room full of strangers and identified something true about him in under an hour was unsettling, wasn't the right word. Clarifying was closer. "You're easy to talk to," he said. "I don't entirely understand that. Most people find me difficult. Hard to believe right now." She tilted her head the same slight angle Lily used when she was thinking. "Most people find me difficult because I say what I see. Most people don't actually want that. Do you want it? From other people?" She considered the question. "I haven't had many people say something true to me in a long time. I had forgotten what it felt like. What does it feel like?" She looked at him for a beat, longer than the question required. Like stepping onto cold ground after a long time inside. Shocking at first, then necessary. Somewhere around the third song, or maybe the fourth, he had genuinely lost count. Marcus caught his eye from across the room. His best friend was standing by the bar with 2 glasses of whiskey, looking at Daniel with an expression Daniel had never seen on him before. It wasn't surprise exactly. It was something more like relief, the particular expression of some watching a problem they had been worried about for years. Finally, tentatively, begin to resolve itself. Daniel looked away before Marcus could raise his glass in a toast. He wasn't ready to be observed. Not yet. Whatever this was, this conversation disguised as a dance, this accidental honesty between 2 strangers, it felt too new and too fragile to withstand being seen. Like something just beginning to take shape that would crack if you looked directly at it. "You're making a face," Victoria said. "My friend is watching us." "The groom? He's making it into something." "What is he making it into?" "I don't know yet." "Are you worried?" Daniel looked back at her. "Are you?" "I worry about very few things," she said. "Then, that's not true. I worry about a great number of things. I've simply become very good at not letting anyone see it." "What do you worry about?" She considered whether to answer. He could see it on her face, the brief internal negotiation, the same one he had run through earlier. The question of whether honesty was worth its cost. "I worry," she said finally, "that I have become someone who is very good at her life and very bad at living it." Daniel held her gaze. "I know what that feels like. I believe you do." Around them, the wedding continued its warmth and noise. The DJ shifted tempo. Marcus and Sarah were back on the floor, Sarah's head on his shoulder, both of them moving in that easy, unconscious rhythm that belonged to people who had decided on each other. Old men in good suits danced with women they had loved for decades. Young cousins bounced chaotically near the speakers. Children chased each other between tables while their parents pretended not to see. Life moved around Daniel and Victoria like water around two stones. And for the first time in 5 years, Daniel Whitmore did not feel like he was standing at the edge of it. He felt, cautiously and improbably, and without quite understanding how it had happened, like he was inside. The fifth song was something fast, and neither of them attempted it. They stepped off the floor without discussing it, just a mutual wordless agreement that what they had been doing wasn't really dancing anyway, and the tempo change exposed that fact. Victoria moved toward the edge of the room, and Daniel followed, and they found a spot near the large windows where the garden lights bled through the glass and made everything soft and amber, and neither of them suggested they should go their separate seats. "How long have you known Marcus?" Victoria asked. 16 years. "We were in the same dorm freshman year. He had the worst taste in music I have ever encountered in a human being. And now he gets a band and a DJ for his wedding. Sarah picked everything. He would have had a playlist and a speaker from Target." Victoria made a sound that was almost a laugh, not quite, more like the place just before a laugh. "She's good for him. She is. She makes him better without making him feel smaller. That's rare." Victoria turned the wineglass in her hands. It was still mostly full. "You're observant about other people's relationships. Occupational hazard. When you spend as much time as I do in wedding venues, you start seeing patterns." "What patterns?" "Which couples look at each other when something goes wrong versus which ones look away. Which ones hold hands without thinking about it. Which ones dance like they're performing for a room, and which ones forget the room exists." "Which kind were Marcus and Sarah?" "The second kind. From the first song." Victoria looked toward the dance floor where Marcus and Sarah were still moving. Sarah, laughing now at something Marcus had said. "That's how you know it's real." "That's how I know." She was quiet for a moment. "Then do you ever resent it?" "Resent what?" "Building all of this for other people. Watching it, never." She stopped. "Never being in it?" "I was going to say, never allowing yourself into it." "That's different." Daniel set his champagne glass down on the window ledge. It was flat by now, had been flat for an hour. "Some days. Not often. Most of the time I'm just—" He paused, looking for the honest word. "Grateful that I can still make something that matters to people. Even if it's not mine. That's either very healthy or very sad. Can it be both?" She considered him. "Most things that are true are both." Across the room, Daniel noticed Marcus had stopped watching them. "Good." He turned back to Victoria and found her already looking at him with an expression he didn't have a category for. Yet not the careful professional face she had worn when she first crossed the room, and not the almost law from a minute ago. Something in between. Something more careful. "You said you were running a company," Daniel said. "I did." "What kind?" "Supply chain, logistics. The kind of company that nobody finds interesting at parties." "Try me." She glanced at him sideways. "Most people hear supply chain and their eyes go to the middle distance. I build custom furniture and wedding installations. I'm not in a position to judge anyone's field." "Fair." She shifted her weight. "We manage distribution infrastructure for mid-size retail, oversee vendor relationships, shipping contracts, last-mile delivery optimization. My company is in New York. I have about 600 employees." "How old were you when you started it?" 26. Daniel looked at her. 26. I know. How does a 26-year-old start a company with 600 employees? She starts with 12 and works for 9 years without taking a vacation. She said it without particular pride. "Just fact. I'm very good at what I do, I believe you. Most people believe me professionally and find me difficult personally. You mentioned that. It bears repeating." "Why are you at a wedding in Columbus?" Daniel asked. "If your company is in New York." The question landed differently than he intended. He saw it a small, almost imperceptible shift, like a door that was open swinging a few degrees toward closed. "Sarah and I went to business school together," Victoria said. "She's one of 3 people in my life I would travel for." "Only 3? I told you, I'm better at leaving than staying." Daniel watched her face. "That's not something people usually say about themselves. Most people aren't honest about their limitations." Most people don't think of loyalty as a limitation. Something crossed her expression quick, like a shadow, and then it was gone. It becomes one, she said quietly. When you find out that the person you were loyal to was counting on exactly that. Daniel didn't push. He had learned something about pain that it told you what it wanted to tell you, and pressing on it before it was ready only made people close. So he waited. Victoria set her wine glass down next to his flat champagne. Two untouched glasses side by side. I was engaged, she said. The words came out level, controlled, the way someone speaks when they have rehearsed being calm about something. 14 months ago. He happened, she paused. Or rather, I happened. I trusted someone completely, and it turned out that was the most expensive mistake I've made in my career. Your career. That's what it was, ultimately. A business decision on his part. I just didn't know I was the asset being managed. Daniel turned to face her more fully. He used the company. He used everything. She wasn't looking at him now, looking at the garden through the glass. The access, the contracts, the client relationships I'd spent a decade building. He had been doing it for 2 years before I found out. While we were planning a wedding. She stopped herself, pressed something back down. When she continued, her voice was the same controlled register, but something underneath it had shifted. I thought I was choosing a partner. He was choosing a portfolio. Victoria. Don't, she said it, quickly, and he understood she wasn't ready for sympathy, wasn't ready for the soft voice and the careful eyes that made people feel like glass. I'm not telling you this because I want comfort. I'm telling you because you told me something true and I owe you the same. You don't owe me anything. I know I want to. He let that sit. The music changed again. Something slow returning, a song he half recognized on. A standard someone's parents had probably requested. He didn't move toward the floor, and neither did she. This conversation had become more than a dance a while ago, and they both knew it. Did you love him? Daniel asked. The question was direct, and he knew it. But something about the way she had spoken, the controlled person of someone who had learned to manage the story, made him want to ask the question she was carefully avoiding the center of. Victoria was quiet for 5 full seconds, he counted. I thought I did, she said, and then I spent a long time wondering if what I loved was real, or if I loved the idea of being someone who was capable of that kind of love, of being normal, of having a life outside the office, a pause, of being chosen. The last word landed differently from the others. Quieter, closer to the bone. You were chosen, Daniel said. For the wrong reasons. That's not the same as not being chosen. Tell that to the version of me that planned a wedding. I'm telling it to the version of you standing here. She looked at him then, really looked at him, the way she had looked from across the room, the assessing, unguarded look of someone who saw through professional surfaces. But there was something new in it now, something that was deciding whether to trust what it saw. You're different than I expected, she said. What did you expect? A sad widower who needed to be cheered up. Am I not that? You're sad, she said. But you're not looking for someone to fix it. You're not performing the grief. You're just carrying it. Honestly, is that rare, in my experience? Yes, she picked up her wine glass, looked at it, put it back down. Most people want you to help them pretend. You're not pretending. I stopped being able to about 3 years ago. What happened 3 years ago? He was quiet for a moment. Lily asked me if I missed Mommy and I said, I'm okay, Bug. And she looked at me and she said, that's not what I asked. He shook his head slowly. 9-year-olds are terrifying. How old was she then? 6. A 6-year-old called you out, completely. I started being honest after that. About all of it, he paused. Lily deserved that. She deserved a father who told her the truth about hard things instead of one who kept putting on the face. Victoria was looking at him with an expression he still didn't have a category for, but was beginning to understand was simply full attention. Undivided, rare. The kind people usually saved for things that genuinely mattered to them. She sounds extraordinary. She has her mother's instincts and my stubbornness. She's going to run the world someday and terrify everyone in it. I like her already. Don't tell her that. Her ego doesn't need the help. This time Victoria actually laughed, not the almost law, the real version, sudden and unguarded, and it changed her face entirely, stripped away the last of the professional architecture, and left something warmer and younger underneath. Daniel realized, with a quiet shock, that he had not made a woman laugh in a very long time. The realization sat in him strange. Not painful exactly, but present in the way that things are present when you've forgotten about them, and then they come back into the room. "You're smiling," Victoria observed. "I'm allowed to smile." "I know. I just didn't think you were going to. You expected sad all the way through?" "I expected you to be kind and closed," she said. "You're kind and open. She tilted her head. "That's harder to do. It took me years to figure out how." "How did you figure it out?" "Lily, mostly. Some therapy. A lot of bad nights, and a decent amount of mornings that were better than the nights. And the work." "And the work," he agreed. She nodded slowly, like she was adding information to something she was building. "I've never done therapy. Why not? I kept thinking I didn't need it. And now?" A pause. "And now I think I was confusing, not needing help with being afraid of what help would find." Daniel looked at her, the garden lights through the window, the noise of the reception continuing around them, warm and oblivious. "That's the most honest thing you've said so far. Don't get used to it. Too late." Marcus found them, sometime later. Daniel wasn't sure how much later. Time had done something strange and elastic in the past hour, standing at the same window, talking with the ease of people who had been doing it for years. Marcus had shed his suit jacket somewhere. He was holding 2 glasses of whiskey, and he handed one to Daniel with the air of a man who had thought about this moment carefully. "I'm not interrupting," Marcus said, making it a statement rather than a question. "You're interrupting," Daniel told him. "You're welcome." He turned to Victoria with his hand extended. "Marcus Ellison, the groom. Victoria Sterling. I know your wife from business school. She talks about you. All good things, I promise." He looked between them with the particularly irritating warmth of a happily married man. She also said she was going to put you 2 in the same room and see what happened. Daniel stared at him. "Sarah did this deliberately. Sarah believes in strategic seating charts." "You weren't seated anywhere near each other," Victoria pointed out. "No, but she put Daniel next to the windows he always hides at, and told me to point you in that direction if you looked like you were ready to leave early." Marcus shrugged with the total lack of guilt of a man who had gotten exactly the result he wanted. "She's very good at people." "I'm going to have a conversation with your wife," Daniel said. "She'll enjoy that. She loves being right." Marcus raised his glass toward both of them. "Don't let me interrupt. I just wanted to make sure you both had drinks you'd actually use." He walked away before either of them could say anything else, whistling something tuneless and satisfied. Victoria looked at the whiskey glass in Daniel's hand, then at hers, which was still the same wine she had been carrying all evening. "Your friend orchestrated this. My friend's wife orchestrated this. Marcus just executed. Are you angry?" Daniel thought about it honestly. "No," he said, and meant it. "I'm surprised that it worked." "That what worked?" "That being pointed at someone could actually." He shook his head, not finding the right end for the sentence. Victoria found it for him. Result in something real. "Yes," she turned the wine glass in her hands. "I almost left," she said. "At 9 o'clock. I had already told myself 1 hour, then home, then early flight back to New York in the morning." "What stopped you?" "You," she said it plainly, without the hesitation of someone managing an impression. "You were standing there looking like a man who had built the most beautiful room in Columbus and couldn't let himself walk into it. And I recognized that feeling so precisely that it made me angry on your behalf. Angry at the waste of it." She set the wine glass down again definitively this time, like a decision. "All that beauty, all that craft, everything you make for other people. And you stand outside it. I told you why. You told me the reason. That's not the same as it making sense." Daniel picked up the whiskey Marcus had left him. "Drank half of it, set it down. It made sense to me for 5 years. And now?" He looked at her. At the certainty in her face, the particular solidity of a woman who had learned to say true things because the alternative had cost her too much. "Now, I'm not sure." It was the 7th song, or the 8th. Daniel had officially abandoned counting when Victoria asked him the question he wasn't ready for. They had moved back to the edge of the floor. Not dancing anymore. Not exactly. Just standing close enough that the music had somewhere to put them. Close enough that they spoke in lower voices than the room required. "What do you actually want?" Victoria asked. "Right now?" "In general." He looked at the floor, at Marcus and Sarah 20 feet away. "I want Lily to be okay. She's the first thing after that." He was quiet. The question sat in him like a stone dropped into still water, everything moving outward from the point of impact. He stopped, started again. "I want to stop feeling like the life I'm supposed to be living is on the other side of a window I can't figure out how to open." Victoria didn't say anything immediately. She let the answer breathe. "You know what's on the other side of that window," she said. "Do I? You built the room, Daniel. You built it 40 times over. You know exactly what's in there." He looked at her. "Is that what you think I'm afraid of? That I know what it looks like? I think you know what it feels like. And I think that's the harder thing." He didn't answer, because there wasn't an answer to give, at least not one that was also a lie. The truth was exactly what she said, and he had known it for years and had chosen not to look at it directly, because looking at it directly required deciding what to do about it. "What do you want?" he asked. Deflection a little, but genuine too. Victoria was quiet in a different way from the way she'd been quiet before. The earlier silences had been strategic, the pauses of someone deciding how much to give. This one was something else, deeper. "I want to stop mistaking control for safety," she said. "I want to stop treating people like variables in an equation I'm trying to solve." She paused. "I want to feel something without immediately calculating the risk." That sounds exhausting, the calculating. It is. It's the most exhausting thing I do, and I do it constantly. "What does it feel like, right now, this conversation?" She looked at him steadily. "It feels like standing on a roof I'm not sure is load-bearing. But you're still standing on it. I'm still standing on it." Something passed between them, not a decision exactly. More a mutual acknowledgement that they were somewhere neither of them had expected to be tonight. That the ground under both of them was different from the ground they had walked in on, and that neither of them was moving away from it. Daniel became aware that his shoulder was closer to hers than it had been. He hadn't moved deliberately, neither had she. It was the slow gravitational pull of a conversation that had gotten real. He did not move away, neither did she. Sarah found them at the dessert table 40 minutes later. She was glowing the specific private glow of a woman who had gotten exactly what she wanted out of her wedding, which was apparently more than just a husband. She looked between Daniel and Victoria with the satisfied expression of someone collecting on a long-standing bet with herself. "Don't," Daniel told her. "I didn't say anything. You're saying everything with your face. I'm just happy." Sarah reached out and squeezed Daniel's arm, brief, the touch of someone who had been watching out for him for years, and knew how to do it without making him feel watched over. "You look different. I look the same. You look like you're actually here." He didn't have an answer for that, so he said nothing, and Sarah turned to Victoria and pulled her into a hug that Victoria received with visible surprise and something that might have been relief. "I'm glad you stayed," Sarah said into her shoulder. "Your husband told me you positioned us deliberately." Sarah pulled back and grinned without apology. "I put Daniel next to the windows, because that's where he always goes. I pointed you at him. Because you had been standing at the bar, with the same glass of wine for 40 minutes, looking like you were about to walk out. I figured," she shrugged. "Lonely people find each other, or they don't. I just increased the probability." "You're remarkably unashamed of that," Victoria said. "It's my wedding. I'm allowed to be matchmaker." "She's been trying to get me out of the corner for 3 years, Daniel told Victoria. 4 years, Sarah corrected. "And tonight, I finally had the right corner for you." She kissed Daniel's cheek, waved at someone across the room, and was gone, absorbed back into the celebration, the way people absorbed back into parties. They were the center of, leaving Daniel and Victoria standing at the deserter table, with the echo of what she had said settling over them. 4 years, Victoria repeated. "I know. The people who love you have been watching you stand at the edges. It seems like they have. Does that bother you?" Daniel thought about it. "It used to. Now it just makes me understand how long it's been." Victoria reached past him and took a small plate from the table, not because she wanted what was on it, he could tell, just to have something to do with her hands. She was processing. He was learned to recognize what that looked like on her. "I want to tell you something," she said. "Okay. I told you about the engagement because it felt fair, given what you told me. But I didn't tell you all of it. You don't have to." "I want to." She put the plate down. I was devastated. Not the way people expected. They expected me to be angry. And I was angry. But under the anger, there was something smaller and worse. She paused. "I was ashamed. Because I run a company that manages risk. I am professionally excellent at identifying when something isn't what it appears to be. And I missed it. Completely. For 2 years. That's not a failure of intelligence. I know that intellectually. But I'd built the belief that if I was smart enough, if I was careful enough, I could protect myself from that kind of blindness. And when it happened anyway, the blindness felt like evidence that I was wrong about myself." She looked down at the untouched dessert plate. "I haven't really trusted my own judgment since." She stopped. "In personal things." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? Fair is fair. After Emily died, I went through a phase, about 18 months, in where I couldn't make any decisions. Not professional ones, not personal ones. I'd stand in the grocery store for 15 minutes in front of cereal boxes. I'd sit in my truck in the driveway before I could make myself go inside. Because every decision I'd made had led to the life where she was in it. And if I stopped making decisions, if I just stayed still then, maybe I didn't have to be responsible for whatever life came next." Victoria looked at him. "What got you through it?" "Lily needed breakfast," he said it simply. "Every morning she needed breakfast, and so I had to move. The thing that saved me was the thing I was most responsible for. She didn't just need a father. She needed me specifically. Not someone functional, me." He paused. "That's a humbling thing to understand about yourself. That you can't outsource it." Victoria was quiet for a long moment. "I outsourced myself," she said, "after the engagement. I buried myself in the company. Turned every feeling into a problem to be solved. Measured success." She exhaled slowly. "And the company is doing beautifully. And I am." She looked at him. "I'm here at a wedding in Ohio, talking to a man I've known for 3 hours, and feeling more like myself than I have in 14 months." Daniel looked at her. She looked back. Neither of them looked away. "I don't know what to do with that," she said. "Neither do I." "That's honest. You set the standard." A new song started, something different from everything else the DJ had played. A quieter song, older, with a melody that moved under the skin rather than over it. Daniel recognized it at the first 4 notes, and the recognition was a physical thing, a cold clarity moving through his chest, his hands going very still at his sides. It was the same song he and Emily had danced to on their wedding night. He heard it from a distance first. The way the brain delays information it already knows will hurt. Then he heard it fully, and his body responded. Before his mind could intervene, his shoulders tightening, his breath shallowing, the familiar weight of memory dropping through him like something with real mass. "Daniel." Victoria's voice came in close. She had noticed. He shook his head. It's fine. What is it?" He couldn't answer immediately. He was inside the song now, in a way that had nothing to do with the room around him. Inside a night, 8 years ago, Emily's hand in his, her voice saying, "We're doing this." The particular warmth of a life that was just beginning and had no idea what was coming. "This song," he managed. Victoria went very still beside him. She didn't say, "I'm sorry." She didn't say, "We can leave." She stood exactly where she was and let him be inside it, which was, somehow, exactly the right thing. He pressed his thumb against the inside of his left wrist. "1 breath, 2. It was our song," he said, "mine and Emily's, at our wedding." He could feel Victoria listening. Not just hearing, listening. "She chose it," he said. "I wanted something more upbeat," she said. His voice caught very slightly and he pressed through it. She said, "She wanted something that sounded like staying. Like committing to something, and meaning it all the way down." "It does sound like that," Victoria said quietly. "Yeah," he exhaled. "Yeah, it does." They stood together inside the music. Daniel felt the familiar pull toward the edge of the room, toward the window, toward the safe distance he had been maintaining for 5 years. The place where the music couldn't quite reach him. The place where nothing could. He felt it. He did not move toward it. "Do you want to sit down?" Victoria asked. Daniel looked at the dance floor, at the couples inside the song, moving slowly, holding each other. He looked at Victoria beside him, her face open, watching him with those steady eyes that did not pity him, that saw him clearly and didn't look away. He thought about Lily in the doorway this morning, head tilted, asking if he ever wanted to dance again. Maybe someday, Bug. He reached out. He took Victoria Sterling's hand. No, he said, and he led her back onto the floor. Dancing to that song, in that room, with that woman, was the hardest thing Daniel Whitmore had done since he drove home from the babysitter's house the night Emily died. Every bar of the music was memory. Every note carried a specific weight. He moved through it carefully. The way you move through territory you know is mind not avoiding it, but choosing where to step. Victoria held his hand and did not speak. She understood, somehow, that this wasn't a moment for conversation. This was something he had to move through, and she was simply here, solid, present, not trying to fix it or fill it or speed it along. Halfway through the song, Daniel stopped holding his breath. He let the music in. He let Emily in, not to hold on to her, not the grasping, desperate way of the first 2 years after losing her, but the gentler way of someone who had learned that remembering and living were not opposites, that you could carry a person you loved and still move forward, that the movement wasn't betrayal, it was the only way to honor something that had been real. He thought, she would not want this for me. The standing at the edges, the windows, the 41 weddings watched from a distance, he thought. She would probably have marched across the room herself. He almost smiled. Victoria felt the shift. He could tell from the way she adjusted, the way you adjust when someone you're holding changes their weight, settles into something instead of resisting it. She looked up at him, he looked down at her, and the last piece of the song played out around them. In a room full of people celebrating love in all its various brave and complicated forms, while two people who had carried their separate griefs alone for years stood in the center of it and simply didn't leave. When the song ended, Daniel didn't let go of her hand immediately. He held it for a moment after the music stopped. Then he said quietly, so only she could hear, "Thank you." Victoria's hand tightened around his. Just for a second. "Don't thank me," she said. "You led." He did. For the first time in 5 years on a dance floor in the city. He had spent years building beautiful rooms for everyone else to live in. Daniel Whitmore had led, and he was still standing. The wedding ended at midnight. Daniel knew this because the venue coordinator, a woman named Patrice, who had worked with him on 4 previous installations, and had the organized, unflappable energy of someone who had seen every possible way a wedding could go wrong, found him near the coat and told him the staff was beginning breakdown, and did he want to supervise, or had he truly come as a guest tonight? Guest, he told her. Patrice looked at him, then past him at Victoria, who was retrieving her coat from the rack, and then back at Daniel, with an expression that said she had registered something she would be thinking about later. "Good," she said simply, and walked away. Victoria came back with her coat over her arm, not wearing it yet, just carrying it the way people carry things when they're not ready to signal that they're leaving. Daniel read that correctly. He was, after hours of conversation, beginning to learn her signals. "I should call a car," she said. "Where are you staying?" "The Hilton on 3rd. I can drive you." She looked at him steadily. "You don't have to do that. I know." She studied his face for a moment. Then okay. They said goodbye to Marcus and Sarah together, which felt natural in a way that Daniel noticed and didn't comment on. Sarah hugged Victoria for a long time and said something in her ear that made Victoria pull back and look at her with an expression that was surprised and then briefly undone. Whatever Sarah said, Victoria composed herself quickly, pressed her lips together, nodded once, and pulled her coat on. Marcus shook Daniel's hand and held it a few seconds longer than a handshake required, looking at him with that same relief from earlier in the evening, more settled now, quieter. "Yeah," Daniel said before Marcus could find words. "Yeah," Marcus agreed. And that was enough. That was everything, actually, between two men who had been friends for 16 years. The drive to the Hilton took 12 minutes. Daniel knew every turn between the venue and downtown. He had driven this city for years, knew its roads the way he knew his own warehouse, by feel rather than by thought. Victoria sat in the passenger seat with her coat on now, her hands in her lap, looking at the street through the window. Comfortable silence, which Daniel recognized as rare with someone you had just met. Most people filled silence with filler. Victoria let it be what it was. He pulled up to the hotel entrance and put the truck in park. Neither of them moved immediately. "I want to give you my number," Victoria said. "I'm flying back to New York tomorrow morning at 10, and I want to be honest with you about what that means before I do it." Daniel turned in his seat to face her. "What does it mean?" "It means I live in New York. You live here. It means my schedule is," she exhaled, "not built for anything outside the company. It means the last time I let someone in, I spent 14 months rebuilding what he took. It means I am very aware that giving you my number right now is either the smartest thing I'll do this year or the beginning of a pattern I have promised myself I wouldn't repeat." Daniel looked at her. "That's a lot of warnings. I'm a risk manager. It's reflexive. What does the non-risk manager part say?" She was quiet for a moment. "That tonight was real. That you are," she stopped, chose her words carefully, "someone I would like to continue knowing. That I haven't talked to someone the way I talked to you tonight. In possibly ever. And that frightens me substantially." "The frightened part sounds like the honest part." "It is. Then that's the part I'll take." She looked at him for a long moment in the dark of the truck, the hotel entrance lights casting everything amber. Always amber, Daniel thought, his whole life amber-lit by his own work. She took out her phone, typed her number, and held it out to him. He took it, entered it into his contacts under her full name Victoria Sterling, the same way she had introduced herself, last name included, and handed his phone back so she could add hers. "I'll call," he said. "I know you will." She opened the door. Stopped. "Daniel, yeah, what you did tonight dancing to that song." She looked at him directly. "That wasn't small." He didn't say anything. "I just wanted you to know I understand what it cost," she said. "And I think Emily would have been proud of you." He felt it land somewhere deep and undefended, in a place he didn't usually let things reach. He didn't have words for it, which was fine, because she didn't wait for them. She stepped out, closed the door gently, and walked into the hotel, without looking back. The kind of exit a woman made when she trusted that what she was leaving behind would still there. Daniel sat in the parked truck for a full 3 minutes before he pulled away. He was home by 12:45. The babysitter, a college student named Jess, who lived 2 streets over, and was Lily's third favorite person in the world. After Daniel and Marcus had left a note on the kitchen counter that said she fought sleep until 10:30, finally went down, "Asked me to tell you." She waited up as long as she could. Below that, in much smaller handwriting, she also asked me to ask you if you danced tonight. I told her I didn't know. She said to tell you she hoped so. Daniel stood in the kitchen and read the note twice. He put it in the drawer, where he kept things he didn't want to lose. He stood at the counter for a moment, in the quiet of his own house, with the recipe book visible on its shelf, and Lily asleep down the hall, and his phone in his pocket with a new contact in it. And he tried to take inventory of the day, of what it had been when it started, and what it was now. He couldn't find the inventory. The day was too large, or he was too tired, or both. He pressed his thumb against the inside of his left wrist. He said, very quietly, to no one in the room, "I danced." Then he turned off the kitchen light and went to bed. He called on Tuesday. He had told himself he would wait, not for strategic reasons, not playing any kind of game, but because he had wanted the weekend to settle. He had needed to sit with what had happened, without immediately reaching back toward it, the way you needed sit with a dream before you decided it meant something. Saturday he spent in the warehouse, finishing a commission for a dining room table walnut top, steel legs, a piece he had been refining for 3 weeks. He worked with the particular focus that came. After something had shifted internally, the kind of work that wasn't escape but clarity, moving wood through his hands while his mind ordered itself. Sunday he took Lily to the farmer's market, and then to the park, and then to the used bookstore she loved, where she spent 45 minutes selecting 3 books with the gravity of someone making major investments. And he watched her and thought about what Victoria had said. She sounds extraordinary, and felt the truth of that, in a new way. The specific pride of a parent who has done something right despite everything stacked eat against them. Sunday night, Lily asked, "Did you dance at the wedding?" They were at the kitchen table, her with homework, him with coffee, and a week's worth of administrative emails he had been avoiding. "I did," he said. Lily looked up from her notebook. She studied him with Emily's eyes. "With who?" "A woman named Victoria." "Who is she?" "A friend of Sarah's, from business school." Lily absorbed this. "What's she like?" Daniel thought about it. "Honest," he said finally. "She's very honest." Lily nodded slowly, that considering nod. "Is she nice?" He paused. "She's real. Sometimes that's better than nice." Lily went back to her homework. After a moment, "Are you going to talk to her again?" "I think so." "Okay," she said it the way she said most things, certain, already integrated. Like the information had been filed and she had moved on to the next thing. Then, without looking up, "Good, Dad," he called on Tuesday. Victoria picked up on the second ring. "I wondered when you'd call," she said without preamble. "I needed to think." "I know. I did too. What did you decide?" "I decided I was going to be annoyed with myself if I spent the week waiting for you to call, and then you didn't." A brief pause. "Then I decided I trusted you to call, and the waiting wasn't the thing to focus on." "That sounds like progress." "It's been a big week internally." He could hear something in the background, the sound of a large, active office, the particular hum of a company in motion. "Hold on, I'm walking to my office." A door quiet. The hum dropping away. "Better," she said. "Long day?" "Every day is long." "How was your weekend?" He told her about the table. She asked questions, real questions, specific ones, about the joinery technique he used on walnut versus oak, about whether he preferred the steel legs for aesthetic or structural reasons, about the commission process. She listened the way she had listened at the wedding, without performing interest, just genuinely organizing information she found worth having. "You know more about woodworking than most people would," he said. "I know more about most things than people expect. I read a lot when I don't sleep." "You don't sleep?" "Not well. Not for a long time." "What do you do with the hours?" "Work, read, think too much." A pause. "I have been told this is a problematic pattern." "By who?" "My doctor, my assistant, my college roommate, who calls me every 3 weeks specifically to remind me that I have one life and I should try living it occasionally." She sounds like Marcus. She sounds exactly like Marcus. "I think there is a type of person who takes it upon themselves to keep the rest of us functional. We should thank them more. We should." Silence, but the comfortable kind again, which denoted, meant it was a feature of her specifically, not of them having found some rare chemistry that would fall apart in the daylight. She was simply a person who knew how to inhabit a quiet moment. "How's Lily?" Victoria asked. "She interrogated me about the wedding." "Interrogated?" "She asked who I danced with, what you were like, whether I was going to talk to you again." "What did you tell her?" "That you were honest. That honest is sometimes better than nice." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "She's going to be remarkable when she grows up." "She's already remarkable." Growing up is just administrative at this point. A genuine laugh, the real one. Unguarded, and even through the phone it changed something in the quality of the air around him. "I think about that night," she said, when the laugh settled. More quietly, "I think about it more than I expect to." "Which part?" "All of it, but specifically," she paused. "The part where you danced to that song. I keep thinking about what that took. I keep thinking about what you said after. In the truck. That Emily would have been proud?" "Yeah. Do you think it was presumptuous?" "I've been wondering since I said it whether it was too much." Daniel thought about this carefully, the way the words had hit him, standing in the hotel entrance light. The specific quality of being understood by someone who hadn't known Emily, who only knew the shape of her from what he'd offered. "No," he said. "It was exactly right," she exhaled. "I'm glad. How did you know what to say?" "I didn't. I said what I would have wanted someone to say to me." A pause. "And I thought about my grandmother." "The letter." Yes. He had been thinking about that too. The letter she had shown him, near the end of the evening. Her grandmother's words on paper, gone, soft with handling. "Love is not a room where only one person can live." He had held it briefly, careful with it. understanding even in that moment that he was holding something that mattered more than its weight. She must have been someone extraordinary, he said. She was the only person in my life who told me the truth and made it feel like a gift instead of a correction. Victoria's voice shifted, not breaking, not soft, but different. Private. She died 4 years ago. I still carry the letter. I still keep Emily's recipe book in the kitchen. You mentioned that at the wedding. I read it sometimes. When the house is quiet, what does it feel like? Reading it? He thought about it honestly. Like hearing her voice without the sound. Like knowing she was here and was real and mattered. Like being reminded that the love wasn't in my imagination. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. That's what I want, she said, finally. And her voice was completely unguarded now, stripped of the professional, register, the risk manager, all of it. Just a woman saying a true thing, not necessarily someone I'm not. I don't mean I want to find that tomorrow. I mean I want to stop doubting my own capacity for it. I want to stop treating the fact that I'm capable of loving someone as a liability. Daniel held the phone and understood what it cost her to say that. He understood it precisely because he had spent 5 years treating his own capacity for love as a wound, as the thing that had made him vulnerable to loss rather than as something worth protecting and eventually offering again. It's not a liability, he said. I know that, intellectually. Say it like you mean it. A beat. I'm working on it. That's enough. That's all anyone can do. They talked for 2 hours and 11 minutes. He knew this because he looked at the clock when he finally put the phone down, and it was after 11, and he had a 6:30 alarm and a school pickup and a commission deadline at end of week, and he sat in his kitchen in the quiet house with the recipe book on its shelf and thought, this is what it feels like when something starts. He hadn't felt that in a long time. It felt, he decided, terrifying and necessary. Exactly like stepping onto cold ground after a long time inside. They talked every Tuesday and Thursday after that. It became a structure neither of them had discussed explicitly, and neither of them violated a rhythm that emerged naturally from two people who were both, in different ways, careful with new things. On Thursdays she called him. On Tuesdays he called her. If something happened in between, something at the company. Something with Lily. Something at the warehouse that was funny or frustrating or strange, one of them would send a text that was not demanding a response but simply the impulse to share the moment with someone specific. Daniel noticed this impulse first with a Tuesday afternoon at the warehouse when a custom delivery arrived with the wrong hardware and he spent 40 minutes on the phone with the supplier working through the mistake, and his first thought afterward was, Victoria would find this infuriating. He pulled out his phone, wrote, supplier sent me the wrong joint fittings for an entire dining set. 3rd time this quarter. Waited. Her response came 11 minutes later. Fire them. You have enough goodwill in this industry to find someone better. I'll ask my logistics contacts if you want names. He stared at his phone for a moment, then typed, you would offer that. Back, you have a good business. You shouldn't be managing supplier incompetence, in addition to everything else. Let me help. He put the phone down and thought about the weight of that sentence. Let me help, said easily, without conditions attached, without any of the calculations she had described running her through reflexively. He filed it away with the careful attention he gave, things he did not want to forget. The weeks had a texture he hadn't expected. He had anticipated something more complicated, more fraught, more loaded with the specific anxiety of what is this and where is it going, but it was mostly just good. Simple and good, the way things were when they fit. Victoria sent him an article about a Japanese joinery technique called sashimono one Thursday morning with the message, thought of you. The precision seems like something you'd appreciate. He read the article, then read it again, and thought about the fact that a woman in New York with 600 employees, and a company she had built from nothing in her mid-20s thought of him when she encountered something beautiful that required careful hands. That he was building something for her, though he hadn't told her yet. He worked on it in the mornings before Lily woke up, an hour here, an hour there, nothing rushed. He knew what it was going to be. He was taking his time getting it right. The visit happened 6 weeks after the wedding. Victoria came to Columbus on a Friday, a site visit for a client she had been managing in the area, which she mentioned on a Tuesday call with the particular careful neutrality of someone not assuming anything. "I'll be there Friday," she said. "Client's in Worthington, so I'll be done by 3. Daniel said, "Do you want to see the warehouse?" A pause. "Yes, and Lily is off school at 3:30. A longer pause. Then Daniel, "She already knows your name. She asks about you." "What does she ask?" "Whether you have called? Whether we've talked." She does it the way she does everything casually, like she's not actually tracking it, but she is absolutely tracking it. She sounds like a very small executive. She runs our household. Has for 3 years. Victoria was quiet. He could feel her thinking the particular quality of her silences that he had learned to read. This was the one where she was negotiating something internal. "I don't want to," she stopped. Started again. "I want to be careful with her. I know, she's been through enough. I know that too. I don't want to be a person who comes into her life and then isn't there." She said it directly, which he had come to understand, was her version of an act of courage. "I need you to understand that I am taking that seriously before I come to your warehouse on a Friday and let a 9-year-old run assessments on me." Daniel felt something shift in his chest that was warm and solid and quiet. "Come on Friday," he said. "She'll be fine. You'll be fine." "How do you know?" "Because you just told me the most important thing. The fact that you're worried about it is the whole answer." Victoria arrived at the warehouse at 3:15. She was wearing less New York than he expected: dark jeans, a clean white shirt, her hair down. She stood in the entrance of the warehouse and looked at the space with the focused, assessing eye she probably brought to every environment. And then, something in her face opened up. "This is where you work," she said. "This is where I live, honestly. The house is where I sleep." She walked in slowly, taking it in the long work tables, the organized tool walls, the half-finished pieces in various states of completion, sawdust on the concrete floor that never fully went away. She ran a hand along the edge of a maple tabletop he was finishing for a client in Dublin. "It's beautiful. It's a mess. It's organized chaos. There's a difference." She looked at the wall of designs pinned above the main work table: sketches, measurements, photographs of finished pieces. "You draw your own plans, always. You could hire a draftsman." "I could. I don't want to." She looked at him. "Because the drawing is part of it. Because the drawing is where I figure out what the piece is trying to be." He moved to the work table. "Sketch it wrong and you build it wrong. I'd rather take the time." She looked at the sketches with genuine attention, not the polite attention of someone performing interest. She pointed at one, a large shelving unit, asymmetrical, with varying depths on each shelf. "This one. Commissioned from a family in Upper Arlington. Their daughter collects things in a very particular system, and the existing furniture doesn't accommodate it. So you're designing around her system, instead of making her change it." "Why would I make her change it?" "It works for her." Victoria looked at him for a beat. "Do you understand that most people would have just built a standard unit and told her to adapt? That seems wrong. It is wrong, but it's also much faster and much cheaper for you." She looked back at the sketch. "You build around people, instead of asking them to fit your shapes. That's the job. That's more than the job." She said it quietly, almost to herself, like she was adding it to something she was already building in her mind. The sound of the side door announced Lily before she appeared, the specific controlled chaos of a 9-year-old, who was trying very hard to seem like she was not hurrying and was in fact hurrying extremely fast. Ashkat. She came through the door with her backpack half on, her shoes untied on one side. And she stopped when she saw Victoria with the abruptness of someone who had been moving at speed and suddenly needed to recalibrate. The two of them looked at each other. Daniel held his breath. Lily tilted her head. "You're Victoria." I'm Lily." "I know. I've heard a lot about you." Lily cut her eyes to Daniel, briefly assessing whether this was the correct statement or an exaggeration, and then back to Victoria. "What did he say?" "That you're honest, that you run the household, and that you're going to terrify everyone when you grow up." Lily considered this information with visible seriousness. "Then he said the terrifying part?" "He said it like a compliment." "It is a compliment." Lily put her backpack down on the work table. Daniel started to object and stopped himself and studied Victoria with the particular unself-conscious directness of children who had not yet learned that staring was rude. "Are you his girlfriend?" Victoria blinked just once, controlled. "We're friends, but you live in New York." "I do." "Why are you here, Lily?" Daniel said. "It's a fair question," Victoria said calmly. She looked at Lily. "I had work nearby, and I wanted to see where your dad makes things." Lily absorbed this. "He makes really good things." "I can see that. Did he show you the table he's been making in the mornings?" Daniel went very still. Victoria turned to him. "You've been making something in the mornings?" "Lily," she asked. "I asked what you were working on," Victoria said, and her voice carried the very particular quality of someone who was doing an excellent job of not smiling. "It's not finished," Daniel said. "Can I see it?" He looked at her. Then at Lily, who was watching both of them, with the expression of someone who has accidentally started something and finds it interesting. Daniel walked to the back of the warehouse, to the section he kept curtained off with a canvas drop cloth when he was working on something private. He pulled the drop cloth aside. It was a small table, oval, low, the kind of piece that sat at the center of a sitting room and held the things you reached for most often. He had used cherry wood warm, reddish brown, with a grain that moved like water through the surface. The legs were turned by hand, not machine, each one slightly different from the others in a way that was intentional, the variation of a living thing rather than a manufactured one. He had been working the finish for 2 weeks. Victoria stood in front of it and didn't speak for a long time. Lily, unusually, was also quiet. She seemed to understand that the moment required it. "Daniel." Victoria's voice was different from any register he had heard from her yet. Not the professional calm, not the careful honesty. Something underneath both of those. "Who is this for?" He looked at her. He had practiced a version of this answer in his head for 2 weeks, and now that it was here, all of it fell away and there was only the straightforward truth. "You." She turned from the table to face him. Her eyes were bright, not crying, not quite, but close to the border of something. "You've been making me a table. I started it the week after the wedding." He held her gaze. "I knew what kind of piece you needed before I knew I was making it for you. I was halfway through before I admitted it to myself." "What kind of piece did I need?" "Something solid," he said. "Something made with care. Something that was built specifically around you, instead of asking you to fit a standard shape." Victoria pressed her lips together, looked at the table again, looked back at him. Lily, reading the room with the precision she had inherited from Emily, picked up her backpack and walked toward the small office at the front of the warehouse. "I have homework," she announced, without being asked, and disappeared through the door. Daniel and Victoria stood alone in the warehouse, with the cherry table between them. "It's the most beautiful thing anyone has ever made for me," Victoria said. "I'm not finished with it yet. I can see that. I'm not talking about the table." He understood what she meant. He let it sit between them, visible. "Victoria, I know," she exhaled. "I know what this is. Is that okay?" She looked at him for a long moment, that full, assessing look that had pulled him across a room 6 weeks ago. But it was different now, less searching, more settled. "It's more than okay," she said. "It terrifies me more than anything I've done in recent memory, including taking my company public at 31. She paused. "But yes, it's more than okay." He took a step toward her. She didn't move back. "I'm not asking you to change your life," he said. "I'm not asking for anything you can't give, I know. I'm asking to keep talking on Tuesdays, a ghost of the almost smile, and Thursdays, and whatever happens between." "And whatever happens between," she agreed. Neither of them moved for a moment. Then Daniel reached out and took her hand, the same way he had on the dance floor 6 weeks ago, the reaching out of someone who was choosing to lead instead of stand at the edges. Victoria held it. "The table has a message," he said. "I was going to wait until I finished it. Tell me now." He turned her hand over gently, pressed his thumb against her palm, the way he pressed his against his own wrist, the small private gesture, made external for the first time. "The first step is always the hardest." She closed her eyes. Just for a second, and when she opened them they were bright again, brighter. "Your grandmother," he said. "No." She shook her head. "That was yours too, from the moment you took my hand and walked onto that floor." From the office, Distantly, they heard Lily ostensibly doing homework, audibly not suddenly burst into laughter at something on her tablet. The sound of it filled the warehouse, big and ordinary and alive. Daniel and Victoria both turned toward it instinctively, the way people turn toward warmth. Then they turned back to each other. "Stay for dinner," he said. Victoria looked at the workshop around her, at the table he had built for her, at the office door where Lily's laugh was still echoing, at the man in front of her who had stood at the edges of 41 weddings, and finally, for her, stepped onto the floor. She did not calculate the risk. "Yes," she said. Dinner was loud and completely ordinary, and the best meal Daniel had cooked in years. Not because the food was exceptional. It was pasta and garlic bread, and a salad Lily had insisted on making herself, despite not being clear on where the bowl was, but because the table was full, in a way, that had a different quality from the usual two of them. Lily talked without stopping. She told Victoria about school, about her teacher, who was unreasonably obsessed with fractions, about the book she was reading that had a plot twist she had seen coming from chapter 2, but appreciated anyway because the writing was good. She asked Victoria about New York with the serious interest of someone compiling research on a place she intended to visit someday. Victoria answered every question directly and completely, without the particular condescension that some adults brought to children's questions, the gentle softening and simplifying that Lily, who noticed everything, always clocked instantly and never forgave. Victoria treated her like a person who had asked a thing and deserved a real answer, and Lily registered this with the first 5 minutes, and from that point forward talked to Victoria the way she talked to people she had decided to trust. Daniel watched this from the opposite end of the table, and felt something large and quiet moving through him that he did not immediately name. After dinner, Lily announced she was going to finish her homework in her room. She picked up her plate, she always cleared her own, and stopped in the doorway and looked at Victoria. "You should come back," she said. "Plain, no performance." Then she walked down the hallway. Victoria stared at the empty doorway for a moment. She cleared her plate, she said. "Every night." "Who taught her that?" She taught herself. "I didn't even ask." Victoria looked at him. Something in her face was doing the thing he had begun to understand was the closest she got to undone. Not tears. Not breaking. Just the expression of a woman who had built her whole life on competence and control, discovering, over and over, that some things moved her anyway. "She's extraordinary," Victoria said, quietly, like she was saying it to herself as much as to him. "I know, she looks like her mother," Daniel stilled. He hadn't shown Victoria any photographs. He hadn't told her that. "How do you know that?" Victoria looked at him steadily. "Because she has your stubbornness, and your hands. Everything else is someone else's gift." He sat with that for a moment. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah, she does." They did the dishes together. Victoria washed, Daniel dried, because she found the dish rack before he could redirect her, and was already running the water, and he was not going to argue. They stood side by side at the sink, and he handed her the soap, and she handed him the first clean plate, and they found a rhythm quickly. The way people found a rhythm when they already knew each other's pace. "I'm going to be in New York next month," Victoria said, halfway through the dishes. "Obviously, I live there. Obviously, I want you to come." He dried a bowl, set it on the rack. "Come to New York. Bring Lily. Show her the city. I'll show you both around." She passed him another plate. She said she wants to visit someday. "Let's make someday a concrete date." "Victoria, I know what I'm asking, do you? I'm asking you to show up in my city the way I showed up in your warehouse." She looked at him. "I'm asking you to let me be part of something, not just a voice on the phone on Tuesdays and Thursdays." He dried the plate. He thought about the warehouse, and the cherry table, and the first step being the hardest. "What weekend works for you?" he said. She exhaled sharp and brief, almost a laugh, and he understood that the exhale was relief. That asking had cost her something, and he had answered before the cost had time to compound. She told him the weekend. He said yes. They finished the dishes. Later, when the kitchen was clean and Lily was asleep, and Victoria's car was pulling up out to take her back to the hotel for her morning flight, they stood at the front door, and Daniel understood that this was a different kind of ending than the hotel curb 6 weeks ago. That one had been a question. This was an answer. He took her hand at the door the way he had in the warehouse, thumb pressed to her palm. Tuesday, he said. I know. She looked at him for a moment, full attention. No walls. Tuesday. She walked to the car. She looked back this time. He stood in the doorway and watched until the car turned the corner, and then he stood there for another minute after it was gone, with the porch light above him and the quiet street in front of him and the sleeping house behind him. He thought, this is what it feels like to be inside instead of at the edge. He thought, Lily is going to be insufferable about this. He turned off the porch light. He went inside. He slept better than he had in 5 years. The New York trip almost didn't happen. Not because Daniel changed his mind. His mind was clear in a way it hadn't been in years. The particular clarity that came after a decision had been made, and the second guessing had simply not arrived. He had told Lily about it on a Sunday morning over cereal, and she had received the information with the terrifying composure of someone who had been expecting it, and said, I want to go to the Metropolitan Museum, and that had been the entirety of her negotiation. The trip almost didn't happen because of Richard Calloway. Daniel learned the name on a Thursday call, 3 weeks before the trip. He had been in the warehouse, finishing the cherry table, the final coat of oil finish, the last careful work, and Victoria had called at their usual time, and something in her voice in the first 30 seconds was different. Not wrong exactly, tighter, controlled in a way that was covering something. Tell me, Daniel said, a pause. How do you always know? You're easy to read when something is wrong. You get more precise. I get more precise when I'm managing. Yeah, she exhaled. Richard contacted me. Daniel's hand stilled on the table surface. He set down the cloth. Your ex-fiancé. He wants a meeting. He says he wants to, her voice stayed level, apologize. That he's been reflecting on what he did. And he wants to take responsibility. What do you want to do? I want to tell him exactly where he can put his reflection, a beat. But I'm a professional, and I have to think about what a meeting could mean practically. Some of the contracts he accessed were still in play when everything came out. There's ongoing legal nuance, Victoria. I know. What does he actually want? The silence was longer this time. My attorney thinks he wants a conversation that could potentially lead to a reduction in what we're seeking in the civil suit. That his apology is a strategy. Is your attorney right? My attorney is always right. That's why I pay her so much. Another pause, quieter. But there's a part of me that she stopped. There's a part of me that wants the apology to be real, which I understand is naive. It's not naive, it is. He is not someone who does things without calculation. I know this from 2 years of direct evidence. Wanting him to be different from what he is isn't naive, Daniel said. It's just human. It means you still have the capacity to believe people can change. That's not a weakness. It got me into this situation. No, he got you into this situation. Your capacity for belief just gave him the access. She was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I should see him, she said. What does your gut say? Not your attorney, not the risk manager. Your gut. My gut says no. My gut says I have built something back in the last 14 months, and walking into a room with him risks something. Not legally, something internal. Then don't go. It's not that simple. Why not? Because I have spent my entire career making decisions based on strategy, rather than what something risks doing to me internally, and I don't know how to weight the internal risk properly yet. I'm still learning that. Daniel picked up the cloth again. Set it back down. Can I say something that might be too direct? You've never been too direct. He is trying to get back into your orbit. Whether it's for the legal reason your attorney sees, or for something else, he is reaching toward you specifically, and you are the only one who knows whether there is any version of that worth giving him. There isn't. Then you have your answer. What if my answer means the legal situation becomes more complicated? Victoria. What is more complicated, the legal situation, or you sitting across from the man who used you and pretending to evaluate his apology while managing what that does to you internally, and then getting on a plane to Columbus and bringing that into the weekend we planned? The silence this time was different. He heard her breathe. The second one, she said. Obviously the second one. Then you have your answer. You make it sound simple. I know it isn't simple. I know it costs something. I'm just saying, The cost of the other option is higher. Another long silence. Then quietly he emailed me a photograph. Daniel waited. Of us, from before. It was a photograph from a trip we took to Lisbon. He said he was sending it because he thought I should know he still thinks about that time. He's trying to destabilize you. I know that. Delete it. I deleted it. Good. I deleted it. And then I sat in my office for 20 minutes feeling destabilized anyway, which is infuriating because I understood what he was doing and it worked regardless. That's how that kind of damage works, Daniel said. Understanding the mechanism doesn't make you immune to it. How do you know that? He was quiet for a moment. Because I understood for 3 years that standing at the edges of weddings was a way of punishing myself. I understood it completely. I did it anyway. He paused. Understanding something and being free of it aren't the same thing. You don't get free by thinking harder. You get free by choosing differently, over and over, until the new choice is easier than the old one. Victoria didn't speak for a moment. You charge for this, she said. I build furniture. I don't do therapy. You do both. You just only get paid for one of them. Despite everything, he almost laughed. Don't see him, Victoria. I already decided that 20 minutes ago. I know, I just wanted to say it clearly. You did. A pause. The trip. You're still coming. We're still coming. I need you to still come. It was the most direct thing she had said. To him. About needing something. In all the weeks they had been talking. And it landed in him with a weight that was nothing like burden. More like anchor. The feeling of being specifically necessary to someone, which was different from the general necessity of being a father, or a friend, or a person people counted on professionally. This was her asking for him. We'll be there Friday evening, he said. Both of us. He heard her exhale that sharp relieved breath that he had learned was the closest she came to saying, "Thank you for the things that actually mattered." They flew on a Friday. Lily had never been on a plane. She managed this fact with immense dignity for the first 15 minutes at the airport, looking at everything with wide, while maintaining the expression of someone who was completely accustomed to airports and was only looking carefully for professional reasons. By the time they boarded, she had dropped the pretense and was vibrating with barely contained excitement, asking Daniel rapid-fire questions about how the wing worked and whether turbulence was dangerous, and what happened if you flushed the toilet wrong. You're going to be fine, Bug. I know I'm going to be fine. I'm asking for information. Turbulence is just bumps in air. It's not dangerous. How do you know? I've flown before. You've flown twice. You told me that. Twice is enough to know about turbulence. Statistically, I don't think 2 data points is. Lily. What? Look out the window. She looked. The plane had begun to move, pulling back from the gate with the slow inevitability of something very large that had decided to go. Lily pressed her face to the window and went completely silent. For the first time in 40 minutes, and Daniel watched her. Watching the ground fall away when they lifted, her breath fogging the small oval of glass, and felt the specific ache of parenthood, the love that was also grief always, because the thing you loved was always becoming someone slightly beyond the version you knew. She was going to be okay. She had always been going to be okay. He had spent 5 years making sure of it without quite believing it. And somewhere in the last several months he had started believing it. And he wasn't entirely sure when the shift had happened. But he thought it had something to do with watching himself choose to step onto a floor again. And finding that the floor held. Victoria was waiting at baggage claim. This was not what they had arranged. They had arranged to meet at the hotel because she had a call until 6. But there she was, in the particular dark coat she favored, her phone in her hand, watching the arrivals board with the focused expression of someone tracking something important. She saw Daniel first. Then, a half-second later, she saw Lily, and something happened to her face that Daniel would think about for a long time afterward. Not the controlled opening he had seen in the warehouse. Something less managed, something that caught her before she could prepare for it. A warmth that moved through her expression quickly and left the professional calm rearranged. Lily walked directly up to her. "You said you had a call until 6, she said. "I moved it." "Why?" Victoria looked down at her. "Because some things are worth moving calls for." Lily considered this with the seriousness it deserved. Then she said, "I want to go to the Metropolitan Museum tomorrow." "I know. I already have a plan." Lily's eyes narrowed fractionally, not suspicious, assessing. "Did you ask my dad what I like, or did you figure it out yourself?" "I asked your dad what you liked, and then I did additional research." "What additional research?" "I called a friend who is a curator there. She's going to walk you through the Egyptian collection personally, because your dad mentioned you have strong opinions about the Middle Kingdom period." Lily stared at her. "He told you that? He said you argued with your teacher about a timeline last spring." "My teacher was wrong. My friend at the museum agrees with you, actually." A beat. Then Lily turned to Daniel. "I like her," she said with the finality of a verdict, and walked toward the exit. Victoria watched her go with the expression of something who had just survived. They had been significantly more worried about than they let on. "She makes decisions fast," Victoria said. "She always has." "She terrifies me. I told you. You said she'd terrify the world when she grew up. You did not specify that the timeline was immediate." "My mistake." Victoria looked at him. Actually looked at him, the full, undivided thing, right there in the baggage claim of JFK, with the noise of 100 arrivals around them. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I told you we would." "I know. I'm still glad." He picked up his bag, caught up with Lily, who had reached the exit and was examining the taxi stand with the expression of a general reviewing terrain. Victoria walked beside him, close enough that their arms touched, and neither of them moved away. New York with Victoria was not what Daniel had expected. He had expected the city she occupied professionally efficient, structured, moved at the pace of a company with 600 employees, and an executive whose schedule was managed in 15-minute increments. He had expected the Victoria of early phone calls, careful and controlled, giving him the measured version of herself. What he got was a woman who knew her city the way he knew his warehouse. She walked without consulting her phone. She knew which subway entrance put you closest the exit you needed. She knew the baker on Amsterdam Avenue, who opened at 6:30 and whose almond croissants were worth organizing your morning around. And she walked them there on Saturday before the museum with the particular pride of someone Piedwood, sharing something they genuinely loved, rather than something they thought they should share. Lily ate 2 croissants and declared them acceptable, which was, Daniel had learned to explain to people, extremely high praise. The museum was 3 hours of Victoria, watching Lily argue with historical consensus, and the feet watching Victoria explain things without ever condescending, and Daniel watching both of them from slight distances, the way he sometimes watched things he was afraid would disappear if he looked too directly. The curator friend, a warm, fast-talking woman named Adiez, who clearly adored Victoria, and had the energy of someone who would talk about ancient Egypt indefinitely, if anyone would let her, took Lily through the Middle Kingdom collection with the focused attention of a professional who had identified a fellow enthusiast. Lily was in a state of restrained ecstasy. She managed it with great dignity. Victoria stood next to Daniel and watched. "She's going to remember this for the rest of her life," Victoria said, quietly enough that Lily couldn't hear. "Yeah, you're good at this." "What?" "Letting her have things fully. Not mediating it. You're just watching her have it." "What else would I do?" Most parents manage their kids' reactions. Make sure they're responding correctly. You're just letting her feel it. Daniel looked at Lily, who was now arguing a point with Adeze, with one hand gesturing at a display case, and the other on her hip, the posture of a person making a case they believed in. "She doesn't need me to manage her. She needs me to be there, while she figures herself out." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "Your ex-wife would be proud of who she's becoming." He looked at her. "You say that a lot, because I believe it, and I think you need to hear it regularly. You didn't know Emily." "I know what she made," Victoria said simply. "Lily. And you, the version of you that was shaped by loving her. That's enough to understand she was remarkable." Daniel looked at the sarcophagus, in front of them, stone, ancient, holding something that had mattered to someone once. He thought about what Victoria had said to him at the hotel curb. On the first night, "What you did tonight wasn't small. I think Emily would have been proud of you." He had been carrying that sentence for months. "She would have liked you," he said. Victoria turned to look at him. How do you know that? Because she had no patience for people who weren't exactly what they appeared to be. And you are completely what you appear to be. Even the controlled parts. Even the careful parts. There's no performance in you. Victoria looked at the display case, swallowed something. That's the kindest thing anyone has said to me in a very long time. It's just true. Kind things can be true. I'm learning that. The hard part came on Saturday evening. They had dinner at a small restaurant in the West Village that Victoria had chosen, not the kind of place that announced itself. The kind that was found through knowing someone who knew someone, with tables close together and food that tasted like someone had cared about making it. Lily ate pasta and declared it better than Daniel's, which he took with the appropriate amount of paternal wounded dignity. Afterward, walking back toward the hotel through the October evening, Lily between them on the sidewalk, Daniel noticed the way the three of them walked. Lily in the center, occasionally reaching up to take Victoria's hand. When they crossed a street, not asking, just reaching, the unself-conscious trust of a child who had decided. Victoria's hand closing around hers without hesitation. He noticed the way that looked. He noticed the way it felt. They dropped Lily at the hotel. She went without significant protest, which meant she was tired, which meant it had been a significant day, and Daniel saw her settled. And then came back downstairs to where Victoria was waiting in the lobby, with 2 cups of coffee she had gotten from somewhere, because Victoria solved practical problems quietly and without announcement. They walked out into the night. For a while they were quiet, just moving through the city, and Daniel carried his coffee and thought about what he wanted to say and how to say it without making it too large or too small. I need to tell you something, he said. She looked at him. I'm falling in love with you. The words came out steadily, without the performance of a declaration. Just a fact he had identified and was reporting accurately, the way he reported things that were true. Victoria stopped walking. Daniel stopped beside her. She looked at him with an expression he had not seen before. Something that was very still and very large at the same time, like a room that had just changed temperature. She held her coffee cup in both hands, and she looked at him and said nothing for a long, full moment. I know, she said. I've known. For how long? The warehouse. When you showed me the table. She paused. Maybe before that. The song at the wedding. The way you moved through it. And she exhaled, long controlled, breaking down. And I am terrified, I know. You know, Victoria. I know. He looked at her. I'm not asking you to not be terrified. I'm not asking for a declaration. I'm telling you because it's true, and you deserve to know what is actually happening, so you can decide with accurate information. She stared at him. You're telling me you love me, so I can make an informed decision. That's essentially correct. She made a sound that was half laugh, half something rawer. You are the strangest man. You already knew that. I did. She pressed her lips together, looked at the street, looked back at him. I'm not ready to say it back. I want you to know that I'm not saying it back right now, not because it isn't, not because I don't. She stopped, pressed through. I'm not saying it back right now because the last time I moved toward something that felt like this, I was wrong about what it was. And I need to be sure, not of you, she added quickly. I'm sure of you. I need to be sure of my own, of the difference between what I'm feeling and what I want to feel. Take your time. It might take more time than feels fair to you. It's not a race, Daniel. I'm serious. Take the time you need. She looked at him with that full, unguarded attention. Most men would not. I'm not most men. I'm a man who spent 5 years learning that the wrong kind of patience is really just fear. I know the difference. I'm not afraid of your timeline. She reached out, took his free hand, held it. I'm glad you told me, she said. I know. She stopped. I'm going to need you to keep being patient. Already am. And I'm going to need you to keep being exactly who you are. Because the person you are is the reason I'm standing here instead of being in my apartment. Convincing wife, this wasn't real. He held her hand on a sidewalk in New York in October and thought about how different this felt from the edges of 41 rooms. Not because the fear was gone, not because the loss was erased, or the distance between their cities was smaller, or the complications were resolved, but because he was standing inside it instead of watching it through glass. and he had chosen that, and the floor was holding. "Come to Columbus for Thanksgiving," he said. She blinked. "That's 2 months away. I know." "Are you asking me to spend Thanksgiving with your family?" "I'm asking you to spend it with me and Lily. Marcus and Sarah usually come. My mother calls from Seattle, and Lily has to tell her about her entire semester in detail. Your mother. She will have questions. She's thorough. More thorough than Lily? Different kind of thorough. Less direct, more strategic." Victoria looked at him. "You're asking me to meet your mother. She'll meet you by phone first. She'll ask Sarah about you before that. Because Sarah is her intelligence source for my life. You know this and you allow it? I stopped fighting it 4 years ago. It's more efficient to just let her have the information and then deal with the questions." Victoria shook her head slowly, but she was almost smiling. "Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. I'll have to move some things. I know, my schedule in November is Victoria." She stopped. "Come to Thanksgiving." The almost smile became actual. Small and warm and completely hers. "Okay," she said. The call with Daniel's mother happened, as he had predicted, before Thanksgiving and after Sekasa had been thoroughly consulted. He knew this because his mother, Barbara Whitmore, called him on a Tuesday evening before his usual call with Victoria, and said, with the particular warmth of a woman who had been worrying about her son for 5 years, and was now being cautious about the thing she had hoped for, "Sarah tells me you're seeing someone. Sarah tells you everything. Sarah loves you, so do I. Tell me about her." Daniel sat down at the kitchen table. "Her name is Victoria. She runs a logistics company in New York. She went to business school with Sarah." "How did you meet?" "At Marcus's wedding. The wedding I told you to go to." "You're welcome. You did not tell me to go to Marcus's wedding. I said it would be good for you to go. I said, getting out of the house would help." "You're welcome, Mom. Is she kind to Lily?" He thought about Victoria in the museum, handing Lily the curated experience of a lifetime. Victoria at the dinner table, answering fractions questions. Victoria's hand closing around Lily's on a New York sidewalk without being asked. "She's honest with her," he said. "She treats her like a person." Lily decided within 20 minutes. Lily doesn't decide fast. Lily decided in 20 minutes. His mother was quiet. He understood the quality of that silence. It was the silence of a woman recalibrating. "She sounds remarkable. She is. Are you happy?" The question was plain and direct, the way his mother asked the questions that mattered. Without softening the approach, he thought about. Standing in the warehouse scene, with the cherry table between them, he thought about the dance floor and the song and, choosing to step forward, he thought about a New York sidewalk and a hand in his, and a woman telling him to be patient, while she made sure of something she was clearly already sure of. "I'm getting there," he said. "I think I'm actually getting there." His mother did not say anything for a moment. He could hear her breathing, could hear the particular texture of someone holding something they had been waiting for. "Good," she said. "Just that. Good. And then tell her she's welcome at Christmas, too. It's 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, Mom. I'm planning ahead. I'm thorough. I'm aware. Does she know how to cook?" "I have absolutely no idea." "Ask her. I want to know what to tell her to bring. This is a Thanksgiving that Lily and I are hosting, and I will be on video call for 4 hours, so technically I am hosting too. Ask her about the cooking." He asked Victoria on their usual Thursday call. She was in a car on the way back from a client dinner, her voice carrying the slightly flattened quality of someone on speakerphone, and she laughed when he relayed his mother's demand. "Your mother is asking what to tell me to bring. She wants to know if you cook." "I can cook 4 things extremely well, nothing else." "What 4 things?" "French onion soup, roast chicken, chocolate lava cake, and a very specific green bean dish that my grandmother taught me that is not negotiable at Thanksgiving." "What makes it non-negotiable?" "It is the only correct version of green beans. Everything else is an error. I'm telling my mother you're bringing green beans. Tell her it is the only correct version. I'll relay that exactly. She'll either love me or be deeply offended. She'll love you." "How do you know?" "Because she once told me she respected confidence in the kitchen above almost everything else." He paused. "Also because Sarah has already told her everything, and she's already disposed to love you. You have a very interesting family information ecosystem." Welcome to it. A pause, comfortable. The easy kind. Daniel. Yeah. I've been thinking about what you said in New York. He held the phone. And I want you to know that I'm not uncertain. I want you to know that whatever time I'm taking isn't distance. It's care. I'm being careful with it because it's real. I know you keep saying that because I do know. How? Because you're honest to the bone. If you were uncertain, you'd tell me. The care is, he thought, about how to say it. The care is what I would expect from someone who knows what it costs to get something wrong. You're not uncertain, you're thorough, a beat. Your mother would like me, she said. She already does. Sarah confirmed it. Thanksgiving arrived on a cold Thursday in late November. The kind of cold that was clean rather than brutal, that made the inside of Daniel's house feel particularly warm by contrast. He had been cooking since 6 in the morning. Lily had been supervising since 6:15, which meant she was mostly sitting on the kitchen counter, in her socks, offering commentary on his chopping technique, which she found consistently substandard. You're going the wrong direction, Lily. I've been chopping vegetables for 20 years. And in 20 years, you haven't learned to go with the grain? Onions don't have a grain. Everything has a grain. That's not... Where did you read that? Victoria sent me a book about kitchen fundamentals last week. It's very interesting. Daniel set down the knife, turned to look at his daughter. Victoria sent you a book. She said she thought I'd like it. She was right. Lily inspected the onions critically. You're still going the wrong direction. He picked up the knife and went the other direction because he was a grown man who could take feedback from a 9-year-old, particularly when the 9-year-old was probably right. Victoria arrived at noon, 30 minutes before Marcus and Sarah, carrying a casserole dish of green beans covered with foil and a bottle of wine and a copy of a book about bridge engineering that she handed to Lily without explanation. Lily looked at the cover. How did you know I wanted this? You mentioned in September that your class was doing a unit on structural engineering, and you thought the textbook was insufficient. It was completely insufficient. This is what actual engineers use. Lily took the book with both hands and looked at it for a long moment with an expression that Daniel recognized the expression she wore when she received something that was exactly right, exactly her, chosen by someone who had genuinely paid attention rather than guessed. She looked up at Victoria. Thank you, she said. Serious. Meaning it entirely. You're welcome, Victoria said. Equally serious. And then Lily carried the book to the kitchen table and sat down and opened it. And Daniel carried the green bean dish to the counter. And Victoria took off her coat and looked around the kitchen with its warmth and its noise and the smell of his mother's turkey recipe working through the oven. Can I help? She asked. My mother is video calling at 2. She wants to meet you before dinner. Your mother has been vetted on me already. She wants to do her own assessment. Victoria straightened, composed. Of course she does. She'll like you. You keep saying that. I keep being right. Barbara Whitmore appeared on the laptop at 2 o'clock with the energy of a woman who had been patient for as long as she was willing to be. She was 63, sharp-eyed, with Daniel's same way of looking at things directly, and she looked at Victoria through the screen for approximately 4 seconds. Before she said, You sent Lily a book on kitchen fundamentals. I did, she told me. She also told me you're bringing green beans and that your version is the only correct version. That's accurate. That's confidence. That's my grandmother's recipe. Barbara considered this. What else did your grandmother teach you? And Victoria Sterling, CEO of a logistics company, woman who had built her professional life on managed information and calculators, sat down at the kitchen table across from Daniel's laptop and talked to his mother for 45 minutes about her grandmother and about grief and about what it meant to carry someone forward in the things you made and the things you chose. Daniel stood at the kitchen counter and did not pretend to be working. He just listened. At one point, his mother looked past Victoria at him and said, She's remarkable, Daniel. And Victoria turned slightly and caught his expression, and he saw her trying to contain what that did to her face and not entirely succeeding. Marcus and Sarah arrived at 2:30 into an already warm house. Marcus took in Victoria at the table, and Lily reading her engineering book and Danpo with his mother still visible on the laptop. And he put the wine he was carrying down on the counter and stood in the doorway for a moment. An expression he usually reserved for endings of very good films. "Look at this," he said, to no one in particular. Sarah took his arm. "Don't make it a thing. I'm not making it a thing. I'm just looking. You're going to cry at Thanksgiving. I'm not crying. I'm just very aware that 6 months ago this kitchen had 2 people in it." Daniel pointed a spatula at him. "Marcus, I'm just saying. I will put you back out in the cold." He built a whole table for her, Marcus told Sarah, at a volume that was not actually low enough. Victoria looked at Daniel from the table, the almost smile. "He built me a table," she confirmed to Marcus, completely calmly. "I know," Sarah told me. "It's a cherry oval. It's in my apartment in New York." "How does it look?" "Perfect," Victoria said, without hesitation, looking at Daniel. He turned back to the stove before his face did something he couldn't control in front of Marcus, who would absolutely never let him forget it. Dinner was loud and warm and complicated in the specific way that a table of people who were figuring out how to be something new to each other was always complicated, not uncomfortably, but vitally, fully. The way complications felt when they were evidence of something real rather than something wrong. Lily sat between Daniel and Victoria and talked to both of them in rotation with the natural authority of a child who had organized the seating chart in her own mind and found it satisfactory. She explained the bridge book to Marcus in detail during the main course. She interrogated Sarah about her honeymoon, which they had, apparently, discussed before. She ate 2 helpings of Victoria's green beans and announced they were objectively superior to everything else on the table, including Daniel's turkey, which she delivered to him with enormous goodwill and 0 remorse. "She's right," Victoria said, when Lily went to get seconds. "You're supposed to be loyal. I'm honest. You knew this going in." Marcus raised his glass. "To honest women." "To honest women," Sarah agreed. Daniel raised his glass. He looked at Victoria, who was looking back at him, and the warm kitchen, and the full table, and the noise of his mother's voice still coming from the laptop, and Lily returning with her plate. He raised his glass. "To the first step," he said. Quietly, just for her. Victoria held his gaze. She raised hers. "To whatever comes after," she said. They drank. Outside, the November cold pressed against the windows. Inside, the kitchen held its warmth against it, the particular warmth of a house that had people in it who had chosen to be there. Later, after Marcus and Sarah had gone, and Lily had fallen asleep on the couch, with the bridge book open across her chest, and Daniel had carried her to bed, he came back to the kitchen to find Victoria at the sink, quietly finishing the dishes. He stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment, her coat folded over the kitchen chair, her sleeves pushed up, moving through his kitchen with the ease of someone who had learned its geography. He thought about what Marcus had said. 6 months ago, this kitchen had 2 people in it. He stood in his doorway, and he thought about 41 weddings, and 41 times he had stood at the edges, watching. He walked into the kitchen. He picked up a dish towel. He stood beside her at the sink, and she handed him a plate without looking, knowing he was there, and they worked through the stack together, in the easy, wordless rhythm that had first found them at this same sink 3 months ago. Her washing, him drying. The ordinary domestic motion of 2 people who had each separately learned what it cost to love someone, and had separately decided that the cost was not the argument against it, but the evidence that it was worth it. When the last dish was dried and put away, Victoria dried her hands and turned to him, and looked at him for a moment with that full, undivided attention. "I need to tell you something," she said. He waited. "I'm sure," she said. "I said I needed time to be sure of myself, of the difference between what I felt and what I wanted to feel." She held his gaze. He looked at her. "Yeah," he said. "Yeah? I know." She made a sound that was almost exasperated, and then entirely wasn't. "You already knew. You stopped calculating. Somewhere around the museum, you stopped calculating. And you didn't say anything. It wasn't mine to say. It was yours." She looked at him. He looked at her. In the quiet kitchen, with his daughter asleep down the hall and the Thanksgiving debris of a full table behind them, and the cherry table she had taken to New York sitting 3 states away in her apartment with its carved message hidden underneath. "I love you," she said, plain and direct and without performance. I know, he said. She pressed her lips together. You cannot keep saying that. I love you too. I said it in October. I know you did. So we're both caught up. We're both caught up, she exhaled. What do we do now? He reached out, took her hand, pressed his thumb against her palm. We take the next step, he said. She looked at their hands, looked up at him. One at a time? She asked. One at a time. She held his hand in the kitchen of the house where he had stood at the edges of his own life for 5 years, and she did not let go. And the house was warm around both of them. And outside the November cold did what November cold always did, pressed in at the edges, tested the windows, looked for the cracks, and found none. The proposal happened in the warehouse. Not because Daniel had planned it there. He had planned it somewhere else, entirely, somewhere with the kind of setting he had spent years building for other people, the candlelight and the flowers, and the careful choreography of a moment designed to matter. He had drawn it out in his sketchbook the way he drew everything that required precision, the venue, the arrangement, the sequence of events. He had consulted Marcus, who had opinions. He had consulted Lily, who had more opinions, with the efficiency of a small executive, reviewing a substandard proposal. The restaurant is wrong, Lily told him. It's a good restaurant. It's not her. She doesn't need the restaurant. She needs. Lily paused, tilting her head, thinking it through with the gravity she brought to every problem she considered worth solving. She needs something you made. He looked at his daughter. The table is already in New York, he said. Not the table. She looked up at him. Something new, something just for this. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he went to the warehouse. He worked for 3 weeks on something he didn't name until it was finished, which was how he worked with everything that mattered. Name it too early, and you pressured it into being the wrong shape. He worked mornings before school pickup, and evenings after Lily was asleep, and the occasional full Saturday when Marcus came over and kept Lily occupied, so Daniel could work for 6 uninterrupted hours. What emerged was a small jewelry box. Cherry wood. The same grain as the table he had made for Victoria's apartment, so that they would always match the same material. The same hands, the same care running through both of them, like a line connecting one moment to the next. The lid opened on hand-cut hinges he had made himself, because the commercial ones felt wrong for something this specific. On the inside of the lid, inlaid in a lighter maple so you saw it only when the box was open, was a single line. Not his words, her grandmother's. Love is not a room where only one person can live. He finished it on a Tuesday night in February, stood at his workbench and looked at it in the warehouse light, and knew it was done the way he always knew, not because it was perfect, but because it was honest. Because every part of it was real. He called Victoria at 11:30, which was later than their usual calls. She picked up immediately, which meant she'd been awake. She was usually awake. You finished something, she said, instead of hello. How do you know? You sound the way you sound when something is done. Quiet, like you've set something down. He looked at the box. Can you come to Columbus this weekend? A pause. I was already planning to. Come to the warehouse first, before anything else. Another pause, longer. He could hear her understanding something in the way he'd said it. The particular quality of the words, and he let her hear it. He didn't dress it up or redirect. Okay, she said. Softly, Daniel, yeah, whatever it is, yes. He closed his eyes. Opened them. You don't know what I'm going to ask. I know, she said. I know you. Yes. He held the phone and looked at the cherry box with her grandmother's words inside it, and thought about a dance floor and a song, and a woman who had walked across a room and reached out her hand when both of them were standing at the edges of their own lives. Saturday, he said. Saturday, she agreed. She arrived at 10 in the morning, earlier than she'd said, which meant she had taken an earlier train, which meant she hadn't slept either. She came through the warehouse door, in her dark coat, her hair down, and she stopped when she saw him standing at the workbench with the small box in his hands. She looked at the box, then at him. He didn't speak first. He let her cross the space herself, her boots on the concrete floor, the quiet of the warehouse around them. She stopped 2 feet away and looked at what he was holding. You made that, she said. Yeah, for this, for you. She reached out and touched the lid with one finger, tracing the grain the way he had seen her touch the surface of the cherry table on the day he first showed it to her, learning a thing through her hands. "Open it," he said. She took the box from him, opened the lid. He watched her read the inscription. He watched something move through her face, starting and moving downward, the slow progression of a feeling too large for the usual containment. Her lips pressed together. She breathed in through her nose. She held the box with both hands, like it had weight beyond its actual weight. Daniel. He was already on one knee. She looked down at him with eyes that were bright and full and utterly unguarded, no professional register, no risk management, no calculation. Just her. The full, true version of the woman who had walked across a room 14 months ago and changed the architecture of his life. "I spent 5 years building beautiful rooms for other people to begin their stories in," he said. "I was very good at it. I could make any space feel like a place where love was possible." He held her gaze, and I stood outside every single one of them. Because I thought that what I'd lost was the whole of what I was allowed. That the life I'd had was the whole of the life I got. She was crying, quietly, without performance, the way she did everything private, contained but real. The tears moving down her face while the rest of her held completely still. "You walked across a room and you held out your hand," he said. "And you told me you were tired of standing at the edge, watching everyone else live. And I want you to know that was the bravest thing a person do. Because I was tired too. I was so tired. And I didn't know how to take the first step until you showed me." He reached into the box that she was holding, took out the ring, a simple thing, not ostentatious, a stone that caught the warehouse light and held it and looked up at her. "I'm not asking you to leave your life. I'm not asking you to become something different from what you are. I'm asking to build something with you, the way I build everything with care, with time, with the understanding that the best things are the ones you don't rush." She was shaking her head very slightly. Not no, he understood immediately, but the helpless movement of someone overwhelmed past the point of stillness. "Victoria Sterling," he said her name, completely, the way she had introduced herself, last name included, standing in front of him for the first time, on a dance floor. "Will you marry me?" She was already saying yes before he finished the sentence. "Yes," she said. "Yes, get up, please get up." He stood. She put the box down on the workbench with shaking hands, and then she had both arms around him, and he held her in the middle of the warehouse that had been his whole world for 5 years, the place where he had poured himself into other people's beginnings, while standing outside his own. He held her and felt her breathing slow. "Your grandmother's words," she said, into his shoulder. "It's where this started. It should be in it." She pulled back far enough to look at him. Her face was undone and completely beautiful. "When do you want to tell Lily?" "She already knows." Victoria blinked. "She knows. She helped me plan it. She was the one who said no to the restaurant. She vetoed your proposal plan. She said you needed something I made. She was right." Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and then she laughed. The full unguarded laugh that he had first heard at a wedding 14 months ago, and that still changed the quality of everything around it. "I love that child," she said. "She loves you too. She will never tell you directly, because she considers it a strategic vulnerability. She told me directly, last month, when I sent her the engineering book." Daniel stared. "She told you," she said, and I'm quoting precisely, "I love you. Don't tell Dad I said that, because he'll be insufferable." He looked at the ceiling, looked back at her. "She made you keep a secret." "She did. She's going to run the world." "Obviously," Victoria said. She took his face in her hands. "Obviously she is." She looked at him close, full attention, the thing she had turned on him across a room before she knew his name. "And so are we, together, whatever that looks like." "One step at a time," he said. "One step at a time," she agreed. They married in October, a year to the month after Marcus and Sarah's wedding, at the same mill on the outskirts of Columbus. This was Lily's idea. She presented it over breakfast one morning, in April, with the authority of someone who had thought it through completely and was not entertaining counter-arguments, and then said, "It's where it started. It should be where it continues," and ate her cereal, and that was the entirety of the negotiation. Victoria, when Daniel told her, was quiet for a moment. "She's 10 years old," Victoria said. "She is how? I don't know. I just raised her." Victoria agreed to the venue within the same phone call. Marcus, when he heard, called Patrice, the venue coordinator, immediately and secured the date before anyone could change their minds. Sarah cried on the phone with Barbara Whitmore for 40 minutes, which Barbara considered a perfectly appropriate response. Daniel built everything himself. He had always built the spaces. This time he built his own. He started in July, in the warehouse, in the long summer evenings after Lily went to sleep, and he built with the focused intention of a man who understood completely what he was making and why. Not for a client, not for someone else's beginning. For the two of them. He rebuilt the altar from the same reclaimed oak he had used the first time. He remade the overhead canopy of birch branches and Edison bulbs, but added something new, woven between the branches. If you looked closely, were small carved letters, spaced out over the full length of the canopy. Spelling a sentence, you had to walk the full length of the aisle to read. The sentence was Emily's, from the recipe book, written in the margin beside a soup recipe in her cramped, impatient handwriting. The secret ingredient is always that you cared enough to make it. He had read it 1,000 times. He was carving it into the ceiling of his own wedding, because he understood now what it meant, not just about soup, not just about cooking, about everything he had ever made. About the table in Victoria's apartment. About the jewelry box with the inscription inside it. About the daughter who had learned to love fiercely from a woman she barely remembered, and a father who had been figuring out how to keep going. The secret ingredient was always that you cared enough. He told Victoria about it 2 weeks before the wedding, because he wanted her to know it would be there before she walked under it. She was quiet for a long moment. "She was extraordinary," Victoria said. "She was. I'm glad she's in the room. She'll always be in the room," he said. "That's not something that changes. I need you to know that." "I know it," Victoria said. "She made you who you are. Who you are is who I'm marrying." A pause. She made Lily. Lily is one of the great gifts of my life. I would not have that without Emily." Her voice was steady and full and true. "She belongs in the room. She always will." He held the phone and thought that this was what it looked like to love someone correctly. Not the replacement of what had been, not the erasure of loss. The honest, generous making of room, the heart that grew bigger when someone new entered. Her grandmother had known. Emily would have understood. The morning of the wedding, Daniel woke at 5:30. He lay in the quiet of his house, the house that had held 2 people for 5 years, and was about to hold more, in the particular way that a house expanded when it was genuinely inhabited, and he ran through the inventory he always ran before an installation day. What was in place? What needed a final check? What could still go wrong? Then he stopped running the inventory, because this was not an installation he was managing from the outside. He was the one standing in the center of it. He got up, made coffee, stood at the kitchen counter with the recipe book on thin shelf, and his coffee in his hand in the early morning, quiet, and he said, the way he had said things to Emily in the quiet of this house, for 5 years, "Today's the day." He stood with that for a moment. "She's good," he said. "She's honest all the way down. She's patient with Lily in all the ways that matter, and she doesn't try to be you, which is right, because Lily doesn't need her to be you. She needs her to be exactly who she is." He paused. "And I think you would have liked each other. I think you would have argued about the recipe book because she has opinions about food and so did you, and I think eventually you would have been friends." He drank his coffee. "I'm not leaving," he said. "I want you to know that. I carry you everywhere. I'll carry you into that room today. The words on the ceiling are yours. The bracelet on my wrist is yours." He pressed his thumb to the inside of his wrist, the private gesture, made again, as always. "I'm not leaving. I'm just finally going in." He stood in the kitchen until 6 o'clock, and then Lily appeared in her pajamas, her hair catastrophic with sleep, moving directly toward the coffee maker with the purposeful efficiency of someone who had decided that 10 was old enough for coffee and had been making this case for 6 months. "No," Daniel said. "Half a cup? No, it's my father's wedding day. I should be allowed tea." She made an aggrieved sound. He turned the kettle on for her. She climbed onto the counter. She always sat on the counter, had since she was 4. It was a battle he had given up, and wrapped both hands around a mug and looked at him. "Are you nervous?" she asked. He considered lying. Decided against it, a little. "Why? Because it matters." She nodded slowly. "The things that matter are the ones you're nervous about." "Where did you read that?" "I didn't. I thought of it." He looked at his daughter on the kitchen counter. 10 years old, in her pajamas, holding her tea with both hands, the way Victoria held everything that mattered. "Yeah, Bug," he said. "That's exactly right." She studied him. "She's going to say yes, I already asked." "She already said yes." "I mean today, at the altar. She's going to mean it completely." "I know she is. I know too." Lily drank her tea. "I just wanted to say it out loud." Victoria arrived at the mill at 2 o'clock, which was not when she was supposed to arrive, because she was supposed to arrive at 2:30, and she was early because she had been sitting in the car for 15 minutes, and then decided that a seat in the car was not what she wanted to do with the time she had. She came through the side entrance, the one Daniel had shown her on an installation visit 6 months ago, the one that bypassed the main hall where guests were beginning to gather, and she found him in the back room where he had stored his tools during the build. He was sitting on a sawhorse in his suit jacket and dress pants, his tie not yet tied, looking at his hands. He looked up when she came in. She was in her dress ivory, simple, the kind of dress that required no decoration. Because the woman wearing it was the whole point, and her hair was down, and she had her grandmother's necklace on, the one she wore at every important moment, the photograph inside it, worn smooth from being held. They looked at each other across the room. "You're early," he said. "I couldn't sit in the car anymore." "You're not supposed to see me before." "I know." She walked toward him. "I needed to see you before." He stood up from the sawhorse. She stopped in front of him and reached up and took the 2 ends of his tie and began tying it with the calm efficiency of someone who had done this before and found it a practical matter. "My hands are cold," she said. "You're nervous, completely." She finished the knot. Straightened it. "Looked at her work you?" "Yeah." "Good." She looked up at him. "It means it matters." He almost smiled. "Lily said the same thing this morning. She's very wise. Don't tell her. She knows." Victoria put her hands flat against his chest, the gesture of someone finding a surface that held. "I want to tell you something, before we go out there." He waited. "When I walked across that room 14 months ago, I did not know what I was doing. I told you I was tired of standing at the edge. That was true. But I also," she paused, "I was terrified. I was more terrified than I have ever been in any boardroom, or any negotiation, or any moment in my professional life. Because I knew that if I walked across that room, and you were real if what I saw in you from the other side of the room was actually there, then I couldn't stay safe anymore. I couldn't stay at the edges. Victoria, let me finish." Her hands pressed slightly against his chest. "You were real. Everything I saw from across the room was there and then more. And you have been patient and honest, and you built me a table, and you put your grandmother's letter in a box you made with your own hands, and you carved your wife's words into the ceiling of our wedding, so that she could be in the room with us." Her voice was steady and breaking at the same time. "The way things were when they were fully real. You are the most careful, most loving man I have ever known. And I walked across that room because I was tired of the edges. And I'm so glad I did. I'm so glad I was brave enough to do that one thing." He put his hands over hers, where they rested against his chest. "So am I," he said. They stood in the back room of the mill while the October afternoon settled around the building and the sounds of gathering guests drifted through the walls. He could hear Marcus's voice somewhere in the main hall, the particular carrying warmth of it, his best friend, filling a room the way he always had. He could hear Lily easily, clearly, explaining something at length to someone with the authority of a person who had been to this venue before, and considered it familiar territory. "Ready?" Victoria asked. He looked at her. At the woman who had reached her hand out, in the dark of a room where he had spent years watching from the outside, and who had not looked away when he caught her watching, and who had said "neither do I" when he said he didn't dance, and had taken him by the hand onto the floor anyway. "Yeah," he said. He offered her his arm. She took it. The ceremony was 40 minutes long. Marcus stood beside Daniel, Sarah and Daisy, the museum curator from New York, who had become, quietly and inevitably, someone who mattered, stood beside Victoria. Lily stood between both sides, which she had negotiated for herself with the calm certainty of someone who did not see why she should have to choose, and nobody had argued because nobody won arguments with Lily. The officiant was a woman named Reverend Carroll, who had married 3 of Daniel's clients over the years, and who delivered the ceremony with the warmth of someone who understood that the words mattered less than the weight of the people speaking them. When the moment came for vows, Daniel had written his, and Victoria had written hers, and they had not shared them in advance because they had agreed, in the way they agreed on most things now, through direct conversation. Rast's assumpts and that the words should be heard for the first time in the rum room where they were meant. Victoria went first. She looked at him, and she said, "I spent a long time believing that strength meant not needing anyone, that the architecture of a good life was one built alone, with clean lines and no vulnerabilities. And then I walked across a room toward a man who was holding a glass he wouldn't drink, smiling with his face and broken in his eyes, and I recognized something in him that I was not ready to recognize in myself." She paused. "You showed me what it looked like to carry grief without being buried by it. You showed me what it looked like to love something so completely that the loss of it doesn't. It teaches you the full measure of what you're capable of feeling. You showed Lily what it meant to be loved by a present, honest, faithful father, and in doing that, you showed me what I wanted." Her voice held. "I am not afraid of this. I want you to know that. I am completely sure. I love you. I choose you. Every step from here." Daniel looked at her through the fullness of 41 weddings watched from the edges, 5 years at windows, 1 dance that cracked something open, a cherry table, a jewelry box, a kitchen in November, and a warehouse in February when she had said yes. Before the question was finished, he said, "Emily taught me how to love. She taught me that love was worth every vulnerability, every risk, every open door. And when she died, I thought the lesson was over. I thought the classroom had closed." He felt his voice move through the words with the steadiness of something believed completely. "You taught me the second lesson, that carrying someone you loved doesn't mean staying where you lost them, that the love she gave me was strong enough to help me love again, not instead of, but because of. Everything I am is partly hers, and I am bringing all of it here to you, honestly and completely, without apology." He looked at Victoria, her steady eyes, her grandmother's necklace, her hands that were warm now, rather than cold. "I built 41 rooms where other people started their stories. I stood outside every one of them. Today I build the room I stand inside, with you, and I am not leaving the floor." Above them, the birch canopy caught the October light. The Edison bulbs glowing amber, the way they always did in the rooms he built. The carved letters, spaced along the branches, spelling Emily's words the full length of the ceiling. The secret ingredient is always that you cared enough to make it. When the Reverend said the words that mattered, Daniel and Victoria said "I do" with the certainty of people who had earned their way to the question. And when the music started slow, familiar, the opening bars of the song, that had broken him open on a dance floor 14 months ago, Daniel did not freeze. He took Victoria's hand. He stepped forward. Around them, the room stood and watched. Marcus with his hand over his mouth. Sarah openly crying. Lily standing between the two sides with her arms crossed and her chin slightly up, the posture of someone who had invested in an outcome and was watching it pay. Her Emily eyes bright and fierce and satisfied. Barbara Whitmore, on a tablet propped on a chair in the front row because she had refused to miss it regardless of the distance, pressed one hand to the screen as if she could reach through it. Daniel and Victoria danced. Not the careful, uncertain dance of two strangers on a borrowed floor. The dance of two people who had walked toward each other, through grief and fear and distance and chosen, over and over, at each step, to keep going. The dance of people who had learned that the floor held and the music moved through you rather than around you, and that love was not a room where only one person could live. They danced through every song. The bracelet on Daniel's wrist held Emily's ring, warm against his skin. The necklace at Victoria's throat held her grandmother's photograph, small and worn and present. Neither of them had hidden the people who made them. Neither of them had been asked to. Because this was not a story about replacing what was lost. It was a story about a man who built beautiful rooms for 41 strangers. And finally, on the 42nd, stepped inside his own. It was a story about a woman who knew when to walk away from everything, except the one moment it mattered most to stay. It was a story that began with a hand, extended across a room, and 4 words that neither of them meant as a beginning, and both of them needed as exactly that. And when the last song ended, and the room around them filled with the particular noise of people celebrating something true, Victoria leaned close and said quietly, so only he could hear, "Just one dance." Daniel smiled. Not the one he had practiced for 5 years, the one that reached the eyes just enough to convince. The real one, the one that had been waiting. After that, he said. She tightened her hand in his. "We never sit down again." And they didn't. They danced through every song, through every year that followed, through the hard nights and the easy mornings, and the Tuesday calls that Tuesday mornings in the same house and the warehouse that eventually held a corner for Victoria's things, and a work table where Lily did her homework, and an oval cherry table that matched the one in the New York apartment. They kept for the months she needed to be there. They danced through Lily's middle school graduation, where she delivered a speech so precise and confident that 3 different teachers stopped Daniel afterward to confirm she was really 10. No, 11. Not 11-12 now. Time moving the way time moved. They danced through the nights that were still hard sometimes, the November anniversaries, and the quiet Tuesdays that caught Daniel sideways. And Victoria learned to sit with him in those moments, the way he had sat with her in hers, not fixing, not filling, just present. They danced through a morning 2 years after the wedding, when Victoria called him from New York at 6 a.m. and said, her voice doing something he had never heard it do before, "I need to tell you something," and told him, and he held the phone in the kitchen of their Columbus house, with Emily's recipe book on the shelf, and said, "We're doing this," the way Emily had once said it to him. Because some phrases were big enough to hold more than one story. They danced through all of it. Because the bravest thing either of them ever did was take the first step onto the floor. And once you take that step, once you choose, fully and honestly, to stop standing at the edges of your own life, you find that the music doesn't stop. You find that the only thing left to do is stay and dance